Budget Committee, January 19, 2022.
Taste and smell. Going blind too.
Oh, I saw that, yeah, I saw that. Okay, we have I think a long evening ahead of us, so I will get started at just 6 o'clock. So the first thing is the review of the minutes. If someone wants to move, I'll accept those minutes. Okay, a motion and a second? Okay. Any, is there any discussion, changes, or additions to the minutes? Okay.
Eleanor did the minutes, however, she does them from the recording.
Okay, all right.
Any other comments, corrections, or omissions? If not, I'll take a vote to accept the minutes as submitted. All in favor? Okay. Any opposed or abstentions? Okay, thank you. We then move on to tab 21, the police budget. If someone would want to move the bottom line, I don't have my present here. We can start discussion.
Make a motion to consider the amount of police budget, $1,927,499.
Okay, is there a second? Okay, second from Mr. Burns. Chief Donahue, you have any introduction to the budget?
Well, let me first,
I'm sorry.
oh,
I
Yes?
believe there was an updated tab. Like an updated tab, that's a different amount.
Yeah, there are multiple tabs.
I have just town buildings, I had, 1,927,499.
I believe the updated amount was 1912389.
yeah,
7912389, okay. You want to change your amendment to that? So it's the motion is. you
Yes,
decided to-
yes, I'll move to, the police budget at $1,912,389.
Okay. And the second? The second? Okay. Now, Chief Donahue.
well, thank you and happy new year to everybody. I just want to start off with saying what a kind of exciting and interesting year we had at the police department, which was kind of unprecedented for Newington. First, we had the air show. Come in the summer, which was definitely taxing on personnel of limited resources and limited people working overtime from outside agencies coming in. But I will say, the good thing is, we had no accidents, no missing kids, no arrests, and no incidents, so it pretty much ran smoothly. And thank you for a few residents here in Texas let us use their off-road vehicles to assist in getting personnel back and forth and working on the Air National Guard. We did achieve national accreditation this year, which is a huge feather in our cap, not only for the police department, but for the town of Newington. And that was done through a lot of hard work from the officers here in the department and with support from the residents of the town and the Board of Selectmen and Town Administrator.
Chief, I may ask, I remember that coming up earlier, this has been like a 5-year project?
It's every 4 years that we get reevaluated. Every year we get evaluated, and every 4 years they come in and do a full assessment of the police department, make sure we are following the best practices. And that is a saving each year to the town of the amount of about $2,000 for insurance purposes through Primex. We've had a couple of command changes in the department due to our retirement. We did promote a new captain and a new sergeant. We've been working with a couple of vacancies now, trying to fill the shift, and the way law enforcement and fire departments work is it's tough getting recruits, and we've been doing a really good job at recruiting and getting people in. We just don't have the numbers to go through it. So we are fully staffed. Workforce this year has been incredible. Our motor vehicle violations and motor vehicle stops has increased by 50%. And I would say that's because we're answering the calls of the residents in the business district of where we should be or where they want us to be, and we're paying attention to that regarding directed patrols. Our arrests have increased by 10%, and our motor vehicle accidents are down 52%. So I think that's a statement in the back that we're out there, we're patrolling, and we're monitoring the speeds. Drug enforcement, I'm not sure if you guys are aware, but we do have an officer that participates in the Rockingham Drug Task Force. This is federally funded. The overtime is paid for that, and the court cases are paid. And what it is we take our arrests from Newington, and if we're able to turn them into confidential informants, we utilize them to help us either purchase drugs, find drugs within surrounding communities as well as Newington. And this year we got 37 grams of methamphetamine off the streets and 18 grams of heroin. So that's pretty much my opening statement. It's like Congress right now. Those are the good things, hit me with the bad things.
Are there any questions on the budget? Yes, sir, go ahead.
The health insurance,
Yes,
is going up again, but the dental insurance is flat? Is that
yes.
correct?
Yes, I believe there.
And actually, health insurance went down 8%, but as employees flex and change plans, it affects our bottom line.
Yeah, this year we have increased families and double pay, 2-person account.
Any further questions? Chief, I have to say, I have confusing, but what was the percentage total that you ran in your offices this year?
It was 3%, and that was through the town.
And they have a step system as well?
We do have a step system, a 10-step system.
10 steps?
Yeah.
Chief, you said you had, you get your salaries under, you have full-time employees, full staff right now?
Correct.
We overspent the, part-time wages, can you explain that a little more?
We did. The issues with that being down 2 officers, we tried to utilize the part-timers as much as possible to fill those shifts. And that went quickly, as well as their regular overtime that we use for filling in those shifts. And we got hit with sickness this year, as well as, the consequences after COVID is people wanting to get out there and do vacations, so we had to fill those shifts. I will say it would have been a lot higher if we didn't adjust schedules and making myself available for working shift work, midnights as well, covering shifts, and the captain and the detective also filling in, so.
What's your policy on, people taking time off due to COVID illness?
Due to COVID illness?
Yep.
Before, it was administrative leave, because that's in the midst of COVID. Right now, it's gonna be the issue of utilizing sick time or vacation time, depending on the circumstances.
Do you expect that to change when?
I wouldn't expect it to change if it's still a sickness. it's just like catching the flu, right?
It sounded like you're saying it has been administrative leave. When has it, or is it going to change to sick leave?
Administratively, I would say it changed when we had the lull in the, during the spring and summer, right?
Okay.
And now it's increasing, and we're kind of monitoring kind of what the CDC recommendations are for the health. I know it's an individual, it would be a individual department, whether it's paid sick leave or administratively. If it's an officer that contracts it during a call, and we can trace it back to a call, then it would be administrative leave. If it's based on something the officer, let's say a gathering with friends or circumstances outside of the department, then it would be sick leave used.
Okay. So you get it case by case.
Correct.
Gotcha. And what about if they're close contact? If they're required to quarantine?
If it's close contact, so then it's the 5 days, right? Right now that the CDC recommends.
You
And
get
that-
DHHS also.
Yeah, and that shift would be covered by overtime, or depending on the shifts, or availability of myself, my cat, and the detective.
What about the time off?
I'm sorry?
What about the time off, meaning the officer that has been in close contact is required to quarantine for 5 days? Is that sick leave or is that administrative?
It would be, it depends on if the contact was from work-related, or if it was, again, on a case-by-case basis, if it was contracted from family members or friends.
And is that a policy that you guys are sharing with information from other departments, or is that something you're kind of figuring out as a police commission and on the fly, or?
I would say it's something that we're figuring out as our department, or have figured it out at this point.
Well, it's tough to see, you have an increase in part-time wages because people take vacation time after they come back from administrative leave from being in close contact and needing to quarantine. And it's something maybe the police commission should take up to talk about and get a policy together. I know in private business, you have to really have those things sorted out. People need to know if they're going to be using their paid time off, or if they're going to be compensated, for a job hazard or something like that. But I'd recommend maybe we take a harder look at that at the police commission level and come up with a policy.
Any other questions on, please, Ellen?
I have a question. Could you speak to the telephone line item?
Yeah, so right now, and thank you for asking and talking about that. Right now, we're trying to go to the VoIP system, which right now the town hall has and the fire department has, which is not the traditional phone lines, it's connected to the internet. And a couple of problems we had with our system is that we had to go down twice this year, where we weren't even receiving calls, it was just dead line. And one was over a weekend, and one was during the day. So one of the issues with the company is they have a third-party vendor that comes out and will fix the problem, which costs us, I think, over $150 an hour for them to do that. So when we looked at the VoIP system, there's a lot of positives with that, with the internet and the capabilities of the system. And one of the capabilities that we like is that we'll be able to go straight directly to dispatch. So if the phone rings and we can set it at a certain amount of rings, if it's 3 rings and nobody picks up, it'll go directly to dispatch. The other thing is if the internet goes down, we'll get notification from the company on our cell phones, or we can retrieve messages from our cell phones which are connected to the line. One of the issues we had, and this was after I put this in the budget that I found out, is a resident here in town fell down, a senior resident here in town fell down at midnight when she was going to bed. She was unable to get up. And seniors sometimes don't call 911, or they won't call the fire department because they don't want to, or the police department because they don't want to bother people and they don't think it's an emergency. In talking to this individual, it was frustrating on my end because when you call the police department, it rings 5 times, then goes to a recording and gives you the phone number to the dispatch. I want a direct line to dispatch. And the other good aspect of this is currently we're paying for a certain amount of phones because we're their emergency operating system upstairs. The good thing about these phone systems is we're able to have it downstairs, and if we ever have to activate the emergency operations center, we're able to unplug those phones upstairs and bring them in, opposed to having phones upstairs and phone lines connected to a different phone number upstairs. So that's gonna be saving. And we estimate that this is probably gonna save, at the beginning, maybe $1,000 at the beginning of the year, once we get the initial installation.
So how do you come up with $20,000?
Sure,
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go right
I
ahead.
didn't look up, sorry. How'd you come up with $20,000 for that line? It's the initial bulk buy of the hardware?
Yeah, so the initial bulk is the 6,000, and you gotta remember, the phone, communications is not only for the phones at the police department, it's also for the internet, AT&T, and the cruisers that we have. So we have also four cars that are driving around with wireless connection, which also is that line item. So the 6,000 is the initial cost, that brings it to 20,000, but you're not gonna see that next year.
Okay, so how come is there a reason why you've only spent, more than halfway through the year, you're only at $6,000 that bill, or the bills that come in at the end of the year or something like that?
Yes,
On what part?
for communications.
Yeah, I would assume that they all, well, no, for telephone. I would assume that they all come in monthly.
Yes.
Has any money this year been transferred out of line 341? To offset a different line or something?
I'm not sure, I don't believe so, but, hold on. Yeah.
So Brandon, you should point that they should be closer to 14,000? Or like, cause we're only at 81, right now, at the end of the year.
Are you saying, you're saying there's a remainder of 6,000 in there?
No, there's you guys got budgeted 14,340 for 2021. And then at the end of August, you spent almost $6,000. Now, my question is that I would assume these bills come in monthly. A lot of times what doesn't get reflected in those money spent as of columns is
Yeah.
because there's a big bill that comes at the end of the year or something like that.
Yeah, I guess I would have to refer to the town hall when the bills are being paid regarding that.
There's Isaac, he's dead.
Twenty-five, 28% still in. I'll have to get back to you on that one, Brendan.
So I guess then my follow-up question is, if the budget was 14,340 for 2021, and we underexpended that significantly, like to the tune of only spending 60 or 70% of it, is the increase really the 6,000 that you need for all of your new stuff, or is there a different number that exists there, and we don't have to inflate the line by 41%?
Yeah, I understand that. I get that, and I'll get back to you regarding that to see why that money is, to make sure that, I believe everything's paid up to, obviously this year, and I think the book's already closed,
And tomorrow they close.
or tomorrow they close, so,
Okay, thank you.
yep.
You can always take that up again in the public hearing if it,
Sure. That'd be
bonds
fine.
are changing on.
Or I can email you guys everything.
Any other questions? Yes,
Question about the uniforms?
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that? It seems to be a big increase.
Yeah, that's a big increase because of, our vests are up this year, which are a five-year term for the vest. So we have 8 or 9 officers that need vests this year, and they're about $1,400 for the vest. So you're not gonna see that, but the other thing is there's a federal, grant out there, but we have to purchase the vest first, and then they'll give us a certain amount back, depending on if we're just replacing the vest or it's wear and tear on the vest. They'll give us a certain amount back, and we did that back in 2018, but I have to have the numbers and the vests have to be ordered with an invoice to supply the government.
So it's a reimbursement.
So it could be up to half
Yeah.
of that,
And it still will show in your budget, but that'll be added to the town's revenue line, like every other grant that we get.
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
Chief, on the, okay, so we got some part-time wages and some overtime that increased, right? Because of you lost 2 salaried employees, 2 full-time employees. And so, do you anticipate, this is tough, and Martha, maybe you can help me with this one. This says as of November 23rd, we had spent about 80% or so, 82% or so of your total budget for salaries. Did you make that up in the month of December? You know, we don't have 12/31 numbers, we have November 23rd numbers. Do you know what the total amount spent on line 100 was for the year 2021?
So I have January 2021 right now.
No, through December.
Oh, through December, I'm sorry. Yeah, so year-to-date, it's 784,653.
Awesome, thank you. All right.
Okay, any other questions on the police budget?
Chief, could you, the bid price for fuel line 635, that's up significantly as well. Is that the state contract, is that over just single year or is that multi-year pricing?
So I combined the last 3 years regarding the amount of fuel that we use, and it came up to 9,400 gallons of fuel we use each year. So what I did prior to doing this budget at the time, when the gas prices were below $3, I was estimating that it was going to be $3.20. Obviously, it's higher than that at this point right now. But we do have a WEX card for our fuel line, which is $2.90, so we don't pay the taxes on that. But my concern is, obviously, is the prices are gonna still go up for the next couple of years. So I was trying to be a little conservative with the price. I have a feeling that that line may go over next year, just based on work performance.
And remind me again, you buy your gas retail essentially to get the tax off,
Correct.
and that's the most convenient way to do it.
It is, and we'll hit different gas stations. We all know the prices vary, especially on the seacoast in the areas. And you gotta remember, it definitely is convenience when we have 1 or 2 officers working and how far they can go out of town. And I know I've been told that gas prices are cheaper in certain places, but you're talking about going a couple of miles out of town or more. And we're just not gonna take that chance regarding it, so.
Yeah, okay.
Maybe another question, but is it just regular gasoline that's over the town garage?
It is.
Is there?
Well, they also have diesel, but yeah. And I'm not sure what the price is over there, and we have used that in the past.
But with the WEX card, I'm sorry. With the WEX card, the chief and the officers get a state bid price versus what we can get, which we've also bid out our gasoline, but we cannot get as good a price as the state
So
bid.
it's more expensive. Thanks.
Oh, so the WEX card is not only tax-free, but it's also a state price?
Correct.
Great.
And we just started that program maybe a year or 2 ago.
Yeah, and whatever gas station you go to, they take the card?
Correct.
All right, great.
One last question, would you mind on the total with COVID expenses line, would you update us on that, what that is year to date? Once again, we have November 23rd.
And we didn't have COVID expenses this year, so,
True.
with
It's
2021.
the same as the department's budget.
Right, in 2021, the PD did not have COVID expenses.
That's fine. So the total department budget, Martha, can you just update us on what the year-to-date was for 2021? The entire year?
I think you've got the latest ones.
Or what am I looking for?
The bottom line?
Yeah, total expenditures bottom line for 21.
For the police department.
Is this a bunch of departments on it?
Top of page 9, probably.
$174,700, hold on,
Current
Yeah.
expenditures.
yeah. 1,747,003.
Okay, any further questions for the, police budget?
Can you talk about dues, since it's 30% higher?
Yeah, that's because, we did have for CERT, we pay dues for CERT, and, we don't have an operator or a negotiator. If we have one, we get a discount. My plan is that we'll have a negotiator or operator come in this year, so that will be retroactive and drop down the price. But they give you a discount regarding how many people that, serve with the CERT team. And currently, we don't have them.
Okay. Any further questions?
Sorry, John.
Go ahead.
Chief, your actual spent in 2021 versus the department's requested budget in 22 is roughly $170,000 more, which would represent about a 10% increase on what you spent this year. I know it's hard with a bunch of different line items in here that are increasing, telephones, and there's things like that, but that's a substantial change. Is there any way you can wrap that up in a nutshell of what the biggest issue is? Benefits obviously are a lot different. Do you have a plan to slow that down? Because if the health insurance benefits and everything like that go back up another 8% next year, and we're staring at another 10% increase for actual spent for the police department, it starts to get a little out of control. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Well, I do understand. I will say this year is a different year based on the cost of the things that, we need. The fuel increase, the, vest that we're not gonna see. Hopefully the fuel goes down that we're not gonna see. The benefits and salaries, I'm going by the town personnel manual and the step increases that were provided, that have been in place for years with the department. So you're gonna see a decrease with being fully staffed. You're gonna see a decrease in overtime. You're gonna see a decrease in the part-time academy. The part-time lines. And with the 16,000, I know those big numbers for those line items, but they're not gonna be reoccurring.
If there was
Any, Brandon, you still have another question?
Yeah, sorry, it's getting a little granular, I apologize, Chief, taking so much time for the committee here.
No, that's fine.
Where you've lost tenured employees,
Yep.
right, that retired or left the department, and you, I assuming promoted within, you certainly shouldn't have the same tenure in terms of total years' experience on the force as you did maybe at the beginning of 2021. Can you explain why there's no savings on the steps or the tenure markings or anything like that? I likely don't understand, but if you can give me a real sophomoric answer, I'd appreciate it.
Well, you're looking, we did lose a tenure, right? And in the captain's position, which I believe he was, at the time, step 7, and now we go down to step 1 or 2. And the sergeant's position is pretty much similar. in the aspect. So if you're looking at the overall budget and the savings, the monies that we return this year based on salaries is because of that 10 years. Now, the increase, I mean, we're looking at a $13,900 increase in salaries, and that is based on the total based on the steps where everybody's performed. Now, in the department, right now, we have officers that are starting to become into the middle line, where the newer recruits obviously start at the bottom. So, I guess to answer your question, it's a $13,900 increase in the salary line. But the monies from last year with the tenure go back into the budget.
Okay, any further questions? If not, I'll take a vote on the police budget. Again, we know the bottom line is $1,912,389. All in favor? Say aye, raise your hand. Aye. Everyone, are there any abstentions or nay votes? Okay, there it is. Thank you. Thank you very much.
I think we have one more to go over is the emergency operating budget.
Oh, right, yep, we'll switch to that one next.
Usually I forget that one.
Yeah, right. Yeah. You got a figure on that one?
Yeah, I make a motion to move the bottom line budget $19,893. If I'm, could be happy over budget.
I have 19,882.52.
What's the definitive feature?
923,893.
Let's go with the higher one. We don't talk about a couple bucks or where to go. Okay, is there a second on that? We have a second. Any questions for the chief? No, I believe the fire chief and police chief are sort of like the co-chairs. Okay, appreciate it. Any questions you hear about chiefs about the emergency budget?
If I can interject, I will say what we did this year, and I'm not sure if I mentioned it to you before, but with the assistance of Pat Moynihan, is I think about 2 years ago, we checked out our emergency food supply here in Town Hall. And stop me if I said this before, but we were looking at food items, pasta, Roman noodles, sauce, that were expired by 5 years. So we had to kind of figure out a plan of if there was an emergency situation, how are we gonna feed 10% of the population here in town, which is pretty much the standard for HHS. So we were able to get meals, and we were able to get the dry meals.
Yes.
And I will say they last 50 years.
30.
30 years, okay, 30, so most of us won't be here. Except for Ted. But, so that's what we started implementing. So this year, right now, we have half of what we need, and next year, we're gonna purchase the other half. The other issue is equipment for traffic cones and signage. And for everybody who went to the air show or visited the air show through town, we tried to do a lot of stuff with makeshift equipment, and we failed at that aspect. And we just didn't have enough equipment, and knowing that the air show is gonna come every 2 years, we're gonna be able to get this equipment from this. And
We're still looking at grant stuff, but we needed some more background for it, so it's gonna get pushed off a little bit. So we started buying some of the stuff last year, kind of like the same thing with the food. We started buying some of it last year and implemented over a couple of years, so it's not a one-time hit. And as far as, with the food, we purchased half of it this past year, the other half will be this year, and the only requirement that we need for that is a heat source and water. So we've already implemented between the police and fire stations that we have extra bottles of water extra big gallons, 5-gallon bottles of water on hand, that if something were to happen tomorrow, we would have the resources there to handle that, based off of the recommendations by HHS.
Any other further questions of the, emergency action? Committee?
Emergency management.
Emergency management.
How about your recording secretary, did you fire him? Fire him? There's a $0 spent on the line for this year.
I promise I hate myself.
Evidently, I did fire her.
Yeah, okay.
And then hire drafter.
Yeah. That's the plan, right?
That, hey, so that's incorrectly a $0.
Yeah, I'll look into that.
Okay, thank you.
So there's two things I gotta get for you.
Okay, is there no further questions or comments? We can take a vote on the emergency management budget. We were at $19,893. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed or abstentions? Okay. Thanks. Keep waiting, keep going.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brendan. Okay, the next is the school budget. Deborah.
50 years, good. That would be ridiculous.
50, 30.
Is the school board here? There you are. Perhaps, some of the administrators would like to take those seats. Is that okay? Then we can hear you a little better. Chris, are you the school board rep? Yeah. Who's the school board rep?
Oh,
So you are.
this is the school board.
Told you you would.
Do we have a designated school board rep for the budget committee?
Mark Joyce, but, maybe it's changed.
Dr. Joyce is traveling, in Florida, so
Normally, the RFs of the budgeting ball, the selectmen and the school board each get one representative. And you get a vote, and you can come to every meeting, but you could send a rep to every meeting. Sometimes budget issues have an overflow effect on the So it's useful to have you at the meetings, and I think you can, looks like you're the active school board rep now for budget. Congratulations.
thank you.
And I think technically you can vote, it's just a selectmen do. Okay, it looks like tab 2 is the operating budget. Am I right on that?
Yes,
one?
that is correct.
Okay, now I had a question, tab 1 referred to the budget not reflecting warrant number 2, which I assume is for the negotiated teacher contract.
That is correct.
Do you have a copy of that?
I have a draft copy of the warrant.
Okay,
Is that helpful?
yeah, that would
Okay.
be helpful. Now, normally we discuss warrants later on in the evening,
Okay.
although if, let me see what we're gonna do, we'll do that at the end. I would be willing to discuss, if it's okay with the board, I could discuss the school warrants while they're here,
Yeah, school.
rather than keep them waiting for the town warrants.
That's helpful, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, may I introduce members of the staff?
Sure, please do.
Thank you.
Okay.
Good evening, my name is Sal Petralia, Superintendent of Schools for SAU 50. It's a pleasure to be here this evening to present the district's FY '23 budget. The presentation primarily will be presented by Susan Penny, to my left. She is the business administrator in SAU 50. Also joining us is Principal Pete Latchow, and in the audience is our Special Education Director, Lana Hoyt. we're pleased that Mr. Russo from the school board has joined us as well. So thank you for that privilege.
Okay, great. I think it's always nice to have you here. Susan, were you here last year?
No, I was not.
Okay, I thought you were. Welcome.
Thank you.
Normally, you have Article 1 is the operating budget, which we're going to discuss.
That's
So
correct.
that would be fine. What I'd like to discuss now, which is all right with the board, is the Article 2, and I see the estimated increase. So, basically, the teachers have been negotiated, this would be the annual COLA, so to speak. That probably is the COLA, for each of those 5 outgoing years. Is that correct?
Those are the increases, that's correct.
Yeah. Do you know what percentage, I mean, when you were negotiating, there must have been a percentage involved. What percentage does that represent?
Yes,
In terms of COLA
if I may add, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee,
Yeah.
the current agreement between the Association of Postal Teachers and the board is due to expire this June. We commenced negotiations with the association in August and had about 6 meetings. Dr. Joyce and I represented the school district and the board at the bargaining table. To your question regarding percentages, the contract is a 5-year agreement commencing July 1st, 2022 through June 30, 2027, calling for annual increases. There are separate percentages for people on step and off the salary schedule. So for staff members off the salary schedule, the increases are 3%, year 1, 3%, year 2, 3.1 in year 3, and in years 4 and 5. For staff members on the salary schedule, the percentage increases for each of the 5 years, 2.8% year 1, year 2, 2.9% in years 3, 4, and 5. And as mentioned or described in the warrant, Susan has presented the annual increases anticipated based on current staffing.
And who represented the town on these negotiations?
Dr. Joyce, chair of the school board, and I representing the district.
Okay.
And for the association, Ms. Lodge, Ms. Lumborn, and 2 other members of the staff representing the association.
And I know that under labor law, these were considered good faith negotiations. You represented the taxpayers, and this is the best deal that you could get.
Yes.
Okay, and you're willing to support that at town meeting?
Yes, I will.
Okay, great. Is there any further discussion on this particular warrant article? You know, we have a similar one with the fire departments coming up, which is one reason why I wanted to kind of talk about percentages so we can get a comparison. Okay, if there are no further. I know that you have in the school budget. Yeah, warrant 1 is the budget, so we'll take that next. But on warrant 2, the negotiated settlement with the teachers union. Any further questions? Do we want to vote? All in favor of basically recommending the warrant? Say aye. Okay, any opposed or abstentions? Okay, great. My first elected office as a young person was a school board here in Newington. And they appointed me to be the first negotiator just as the teachers union was organized. I appreciate what you've gone through. I know it's been a long process. Thanks. What we're going to do now is discuss the budget, which is warrant 1, and we'll approve that on the basis of the budget. So if you guys, I say go to tab 2, which is the bottom line. And we does somebody have that here?
So just so you know, under tab 1 is also a summary.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Tab 2 is closest to what we usually work with.
Okay.
So we'll work on that, because we'll be asking you probably some detailed questions.
That
But
sounds-
we do appreciate the summary, and it saves me some time.
Yeah.
I think that does bottom line here,
2 million.
yeah. Proposed 2,398,000.
That's correct,
777,223, okay. Is that a motion?
Yes, sir.
Do we have a second? Second, good. Okay. Do you have any overview on the budget that you'd like to present to us?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
So the budget is, down, approximately $13,662.
I'll give you a minute to put your mask back on.
You
I
are
know-
okay?
I know, it's difficult to manage.
I know, I just didn't know if you could hear me.
I could give you five.
Okay, perfect. So anyway, the budget is down $13,662, or approximately 0.58%.
Mhm.
So, a little over 0.5% down. The following should be noted, that our decreased costs were in transportation, middle and high school tuition,
Mhm.
but we had some increased salaries, due to hiring and also increasing, a small percentage of a couple of the positions. For instance, the librarian, is going from 0.15 to 0.20. We also have some special education, increases due to IEP needs.
Okay, so when, at the bottom line of the budget, we'll have to add that first year of settlement if that warrant passes, right?
So if the article, yes, so they're two separate articles, and then next year, the year 2 that you see there, 26,719 becomes part of the fiscal year 24 budget.
All right.
But the $29,468 is in addition to the $2,398,777.
How about the one that's coming up? The current budget we're discussing, which is 2,398,000.
That's correct.
Now, do we add the first year settlement to that?
Yes, you do. You
We do,
need
so
to
that would
add
take it just a
29.
little bit over what it was last year, or this current year.
That's
Yeah.
correct. You add that to it.
We add that to it, okay. Great, the fire department does the same thing, it's just the way the bookkeeping works, so the budget committee has to realize that it's going up a bit, once you add in the inflation factor that was negotiated. Okay, great, please, proceed.
Yeah, so just so you know, I mean, it's an overall, the operating budget is a penny, decrease on your tax rate if all revenues were to remain the same. And the collective bargaining adds 3 cents, so an overall increase of 2 cents,
Overall increase of 2 cents after the collective bargaining.
including the collective bargaining agreement. That is
Yeah.
correct.
Okay. 2 cent increase. All right, good. Any other comments?
No, unless you have any specific questions.
Okay, any significant changes in staff or resources?
Other than the ones I just mentioned to you, that we hired some people at a slightly higher rate than we replaced,
Mm-hmm.
and that we are increasing small percentages of a couple of positions. For
Okay.
example, the librarian is going from 0.15 to 0.20, and the same with the music teacher, correct?
And do those employees qualify for the same percentage increases year over year as the full-time employees?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand, I didn't hear you.
Percentage of wage increases, do the part-time, the 0.20s or the 0.5s, do they qualify for the same increases in percentages as
Yes,
the full-time
their
employees?
staff, as long as they are part of the CBA, as long as they are, under the teaching contract, that is correct.
Are most of these people under the teaching contract?
The two positions that I mentioned are,
Yeah, right. Special ed, is that
special education is also part of the, teaching contract.
pretty much anybody in a teaching role or a counseling role?
That is correct.
Yeah, okay.
You get the same, sorry about that, John, go ahead.
Who would, obviously, the cafeteria staff and the maintenance
The
staff,
nurse is also not part of the
she's off the
CBA.
contract.
The para principal.
Sure. Yeah, okay. And that educator's not on the contract.
They are not part of the CBA, that is correct.
How are those rate increases negotiated just by the school board?
They are, yeah, that is correct.
Okay. Because you got, even under the guidance council line, you're saying budget for last year is the same as this year, there's no increase there?
Other than what's in the you're right, actually, because the CBA is a separate article, that's correct, there's no increase. Except, no, we did not increase that percentage either.
What's your enrollment this year, and what do you anticipate next year at the elementary school?
52 students is our current enrollment, and I anticipate to be right about the same, right around 50.
Okay, plus or minus 50 for next year.
And how many are tuitioned?
We currently have 7 tuition students.
Yes.
I have a quick question. So are the amounts that are in the article number 2 that we just voted on, so those positions that are going up, is that being calculated into these numbers already, or is it gonna go up a little bit more if we pass? Do you see what I'm saying?
You mean like the 0.5?
Yeah.
They will go up ever so slightly
So
because
they'll go
they're
up.
at their current, percentage, at the 0.15, for instance, as opposed to the 0.20.
And then, could you, I've kind of lost, now that my boys are older, can you explain sort of what the teacher breakdown looks like? So you have kindergarten, first and second are all in their own classrooms?
Yes.
Okay. And
So
then-
we have, yep, this year, so one of the beauties, I think, of Newington Public School is that we are flexible. And we really take a moment to look at the needs of our students, as well as the community. So given our current needs in our building, we elected to have a standalone kindergarten, a standalone first grade, and a standalone second grade this year, very small class. The second graders were the one group of our students that were, I think, most impacted during the COVID time. They were kindergartners and then rolled into first graders last year. So it's a small group, 5 students. In the afternoons, they go in with the first and second grade class. So that we combine them in the afternoons. They're a standalone class for for mathematics and reading primarily.
So that means that the kindergarten teacher is half-time?
No, it was a full-time teaching position that we had added the year prior. And that teaching position was for a reading and math coach.
Okay.
And so basically to help us through the building, and that would be the kind of our anticipated down the road. She's also a certified teacher, so looking again at what the needs are within our building, that's why we went and had her be a full-time classroom teacher to meet that need.
Mornings, and she functions with the
Yep, and then she, in the afternoons, is co-teaching with the first and second grade group, so that we're able to when we bring them all together, it is 19 students. So bringing that multi-level in, so it's nice to have 2 teachers, different spaces, and be able to break it down, so that we're still able to meet the independent needs of each of our students.
Right, now, 4th, 5th, and 6th grade, are they combined, or are they?
So we have a 4th grade room, which is currently 18 students, and a 5th, 6th grade room, which is 7 students.
Okay, 13 is first versus 7.
Sorry, it's 18 versus 7.
Oh, funny how a small sample could have lots of variation.
Right, and again, looking at the needs of our students, taking those 2 grades, wanting to encourage those peer groups. The 4th graders are tremendous leaders within the school, and just we thought would be such a great positive influence for our 3rd grade class, for instance.
Sure.
That's how some of those decisions are made.
Yeah, good point. Okay. Any further questions for the school budget?
A couple of, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. John.
I was curious, how many full-time students did you have as of September enrolled?
51. We had 1 student move in earlier this week.
And I guess if 7 of those were the tuitions, 7, that includes the 7 tuition students?
That does.
And how much tuition did the tuition students pay?
Roughly it's 7,800.
And I think in the past, we tried to make this competitive with maybe the parochial schools were and other private schools.
Same. The formula that we use to calculate that is based on the averages of 3 local parochial schools, St. Pat's, St. Mary's, and I believe Sacred Heart. Excuse me, correction, it's 7,900.
Oh, 79. Also concerning the superintendent, is the superintendent of just the elementary school? Or does the superintendent serve other schools as well?
I am the superintendent for SAU 50, School Administrative Unit 50, which comprises 4 school districts.
Oh, okay.
Greenland, Newington, Newcastle, and Rye.
Oh, so it's quite a lot of schools.
And each town, each district has its own independent school board under the umbrella of SAU 50.
Oh, okay. So I noticed that the line item for superintendent seemed to be in 6 figures. Did I get that wrong? So, superintendent.
No, that's for the whole SAU office.
Oh, okay.
What ends up happening is the SAU has their own budget that incorporates all the operating costs to run the SAU office. And then it is broken out proportionally to each of the 4 districts. And your share is $237,955, or approximately 12.5% of the SAU budget.
Okay, so 12%. So the superintendent budget then is, if it's 200,000, it's 12. That means it'd be $2 million would be the total budget for the superintendent's office.
Yes, that's correct. 1,905,000.
So the superintendent's office, I mean, that would have like a superintendent and a secretary, or what?
Well, there's the superintendent, then there's 11 of us, yeah.
11, okay. So that's 2 million people, $2 million for 11 people.
1.9, yeah.
You mentioned that Newington's share of that is, what, 12%, I think you said?
12.5.
What is that based on? Is it based on number of students? Can you talk about that a little bit?
It is a formula that was here long before I came. It's basically on your valuation in Newington, and we take a percentage of that of the 4 towns. It's actually under tab 6, I believe, in your book.
You mean housing valuation?
Yes. So if you turn to tab 6, actually, let's see. Probably-
There's a pie chart on it.
Yeah, the pie chart.
Yeah.
But, so the valuation has its own percentage. Then we do average daily attendance for the students, so basically how many students are coming through your doors at a given date. And then that is another percentage. We combine those 2 percentages and then multiply that by the $1.9 million of the SAU budget. So, in other words, Newington's valuation is $1,094,913. Your valuation percentage is 18.86. Your average daily membership is 52 students. That percentage is 6.12, so you get a combined percentage of 12.49. And that equates to the $237,955 that you pay towards the SAU budget.
So it's really 50-50, based half on average enrollment and half on valuation.
That is correct.
Another follow-up question. How many students are in SAU 50 total, full-time?
Approximately 850. based on this calculation, which is the snapshot in time that we use to calculate.
So, said another way, our valuation is as high as it is because, I mean, our percentage is high, given sort of the valuation of the homes here.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, your
Because
valuation.
you only got 52 out of 800 students.
Yeah, your valuation, you know, but I mean, Rise is much higher,
Yeah.
Rise is double, so.
Rye also has double the schools, right?
Yeah, no, but I mean, their valuation is double,
Right.
yeah.
And
For
Greenland,
homes, they
Greenland
also
has
have
two
more
schools.
grades, right?
Yeah, but the
Usually go to
valuation is
sixth-
based on
Sixth
property.
grade, but Fry goes up, they have a middle school,
They go through 8,
8, so you have
Yeah.
2 more grades.
yeah, but the valuation is based on your property, what your property is worth, not on how many people are in the school.
But there's 2 more grades of students,
Okay,
right?
yeah,
Where does the valuation numbers come from?
that's from the, Department of Revenue, sorry.
Tax assessment?
Yes, exactly.
Well, with the landing question, is that tax assessment solely on residential, or is that tax assessment for Newington as a whole?
I believe it's Newington as a whole, but I'm not positive.
That'd be a
And
big problem.
correct that businesses don't pay school tax. They do our utilities.
Yeah, so it probably is a
Utilities,
valuation.
Utilities.
They don't pay a certain tax, right? They pay some school tax. There's one exception that utilities don't pay.
They don't pay it to us, they pay it to the state directly.
They pay it to the state.
You don't pay the local, you pay the state.
Yeah,
Pay to the state, yeah. So the state sort of collectivized all that revenue from the utilities and took it.
Right.
But the other, places do not. Now, anything on fees does not. They don't pay any education.
Yeah, the other one.
Go ahead.
So I just wanna make sure I'm understanding this correctly. So 50% of how that rate is calculated is based on number of students,
That's correct.
even though seems to me that seems, unfortunate for Newington, because I feel like, you know, we don't have the opportunity to have, you know, 7th and 8th grade middle school students, so we are losing, you know, potential students that would be formulated into that equation.
Again, this was
Yeah,
long before
no,
my
I
time.
understand.
Yeah.
Well, if we now, you have to spend time administrating the 7th and 8th grade, the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. But you don't, so they pay more because they have those extra students, so they're really paying more for that service.
That is true.
But you don't count our students who will go to Portsmouth.
I'm sorry, I don't
You
count.
do not count our students who go to Portsmouth in this formula.
No,
So we're saving that money. The tuition we pay Portsmouth covers, you know, SAU, what, 52? Is it?
that's Portsmouth.
John mentioned budget, but we're saving half of that money. The other half of the money is based on the valuation.
Right, yeah,
which
yeah,
is-
we save the student half.
Which
That
doesn't
was-
matter.
Yeah, the valuation, it was a compromise when they established this. I was on the school board when they did.
Oh,
And it was, okay, what's fair? It's a little bit socialistic, if you will, but I mean, half of it is by overall valuation, so Newcastle and Newington pay a lot per pupil. Half of it is by total number of students. So Greenland gets a break and Rye is somewhere in the middle. That's how I,
okay, thank you, yeah.
Can you speak to at all why the percentage of our contribution went up from 8 and change to 12 and change?
Your valuation, increased quite a bit last year. It went from,
I'd be surprised to hear though that our valuation exceeded the valuation increases of the other surrounding towns that seem to be doing this fine.
I didn't bring theirs with me, but yours did increase quite a bit. Sorry, hold on. Somewhere. So last year it was 969,779. No, I'm sorry, that's what it is this year.
that's million.
And the window,
Yes.
sorry.
This is including the industrial corridor. It sounds like there's an argument we had there that it shouldn't. If they pay state school taxes, right? They're not contributing to
Oh,
the
yeah,
school
this is
budget
from,
here. Oh, but we're paying for the evaluation. It doesn't seem to make a lot of sense.
So when do we change tax assessors? Because didn't we go to a new tax assessor?
I'm sorry, Jennifer, I can't hear you.
Sorry, can you hear me now? Yeah. When do we change tax assessors? I don't know if this has anything to do with that. Right? 'Cause it's not,
Yeah, we changed tax assessor to a company,
yeah.
in 2020.
I'm just wondering if this may be an unintended consequence, that's all. To have such a huge spike in valuation.
Yeah, it is increase.
What was that?
No, she was saying there was a big spike in valuation.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it costs the taxpayers for their contributions to the SAU $80,000 this year versus last year.
Everyone's percentage went up. I mean,
Yeah.
their contribution went up,
That's correct. Ours disproportionately though.
yeah.
So if everybody's went up, easy question to ask, that means the SAU budget went up?
It did.
By 10%.
Yeah, another follow-up question. So, as I understand it, the main duty of the superintendent's office is to review and critique the lesson plans and curriculum of the teachers. Is that correct?
There's a myriad of duties, and they're hopefully proportionally evenly distributed among several members of the team, if you will, several members of I call them the senior staff. It is my position as superintendent. We have an assistant superintendent for curriculum and instruction. We have the business administrator. We have the director of special education. And then we have a facilities manager and a director of technology, Mr. Bratton, who just arrived.
So in addition to reviewing the lesson plans, you manage the business aspects of each school?
The role of the SAU office and each administrator and support staff person is to provide support to the schools, to each district.
Right, I'm
So-
just trying to understand what that entails.
I'm sorry?
I'm trying to understand what that entails.
It's beyond, supervising or monitoring lesson plans. That's really the function and role of the building administrator. So, we have a comprehensive, supervision evaluation plan called the Plan for Effective Teaching. That is the blueprint for supervision evaluation of staff. So that is the model that we follow to annually monitor and evaluate our district staff, not only our professional teaching staff, but also our support staff. So that's one of many duties that the SAU office performs. The director of special education has expertise in special education law, IEPs. There are other people who have expertise in Section 504, IDA, all of that. So there's different levels of expertise that provide service to each of the 4 districts.
We process the paychecks for the teachers, and pay the school bills, the list goes on and on, really.
I see.
Yeah. I personally file all the financial reports that need to be filed with the state, on behalf of the Newington School District. Prepare your budget. Again, the list is quite extensive, really, of what, the services that the SAU, offer.
I see. Thank you. I just wanted to have a better understanding of the duties that you perform.
Yeah.
Is there any, yes?
If I could just make and I don't know if I
connecting the dots, but I think, and maybe this is just a comment for the selectmen and Martha, that I think that as we are considering valuation and going through that process, it feels like there's a double dip going on here. So we raise the valuation, and because of that, we're getting a hit on the school. And so I guess I would just caution us to really be mindful, and I don't know if you guys took that into consideration when you were doing our taxes. Because, you know, this is news to me, it may not be news to others, but there are other implications as opposed to just raising the tax rate for the resident. And I think we're seeing that today here.
Yeah, I gotta agree with you, Jen, too, on not only has the valuation grown for individual homeowners in town, with the tax rate going up as well, people are spending more taxes. So you could say you held the tax rate at the same level, but really there's an increase there, and then there's also these back doors of how it affects the SAU, et cetera.
Yeah.
So,
One other quick question, and maybe this is one better for Principal Atchell. Unfortunately, I don't have the, look at what the year-to-date expenditure was, so, you know, you get some just increases, and just if you could casually give me feedback on speech therapy, contracting services is up 60%.
Solely based on IEP needs.
Okay. So that's, hours that you contract out or something like that?
Based on the IEPs of individual, students.
Okay, occupational therapy, contracting services, same thing, I'm assuming? Okay. I got one more in here. Special education teacher salary,
That was just a new hire.
that increased. And has the staff grown at all this year over last year?
Yes, we added a half-day part-time para in the mornings to the kindergarten class.
for a specific need or something like that?
It's a general para. But that's currently right now in school, that is not in the budget then for next year, that is a singular need for this year.
Any? Yes.
These couple of questions, Pete, these might go to you. Line 495, asbestos services is being funded. Is there something particular?
It's just going through and testing all the different surfaces in the school.
Okay, is that like a, yeah, I noticed it's not been funded before.
It's an annual requirement. I think some of these things are coming to light now that we have a facilities director that is meeting the needs that should be met through the state and other.
And that also came across when we were talking about COVID and air quality within the building and things like that. And so with that, that's where that initially came from.
Okay.
Then we went through and tested all the different surfaces in the building. So that's what that is.
And then, line 430, down on page 17, security and fire alarm systems, you're increasing 113% from 21 budget and then 119%.
So I think that is actually a reconfiguration of lines. So we've always had those, they were just in separate lines. Now they're being all moved to the same one. That cost is actually pretty much standard. We've always had Mammoth Fire Solutions, we continue with Mammoth Fire, but what the difference is, you're seeing it all consolidated down to one line, as opposed to being spread out above through plumbing, through electrical services and and then alarm services.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
In this tab 6, I don't know, a few pages after that pie chart, it does say that the health insurance, there's a health insurance increase, sorry.
A few pages after the pie
Yeah.
chart, it does say there's a health insurance increase of 14.8%.
That is correct.
Okay, so that wasn't reflected on that first
summer, I guess that's why. So,
Um,
so the 41,000, and this is offered to full-time employees, I'm assuming?
yes. So the 41,000 is the total, your increase is only $5,000.
Our share.
That's correct. And that's a guaranteed maximum rate. We're hoping that that rate does not come to fruition, then potentially it could be lower. But you have to budget for what they tell you, is the guaranteed maximum.
Any other questions?
I went to a school board meeting a while ago and asked a question. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to, go to the following meeting because of work conflicts, to hear the answer. And I think a letter was sent to me, but it was, the question was, does it make sense to continue sending Newington students after sixth grade to, seventh grade in, Portsmouth? Or does it make sense to do what Portsmouth does and send them 1 year sooner? I think there's, you know, the question was, does it make sense more for the kids in terms of their development? And I'm sure the answer is, one kid is better to go sooner, and another kid might be better to go later. But on average, it's not an obvious answer. And then and I think the answer, secondhand, I wasn't there, was more of a, it wasn't more on the students, which is better, and that sort of stuff. It was more some sort of financial discussion. I was a little confused on the secondhand response I got. Again, I'm hearing telephone being one person says something and then it gets,
So
through.
that was,
So
that was
what's the
my letter,
answer to
Mr.
that?
Belanger, that you received at your home. I acknowledge the fact on behalf of the board, school board, that you attended the December school board meeting, and during public comment, you had expressed that thought about, has anyone thought about sending grade 6 students to Portsmouth instead of keeping them at the school?
Right.
So we did, as I mentioned in the letter I sent you, we did include that item on the agenda last week at the school board meeting. And the board discussed it at length. The administration and the building administrator provided input. I also provided the school board the current tuition agreement between Portsmouth and Newington. And I won't say that was the prevailing factor, but the discussion among board members and the administration was that we're currently basically in the middle of I believe, a 4-year agreement with Portsmouth. And we would need to reopen that contract to include another grade level. The board also had a discussion with the administration about the efficacy of including grade 6. And as you point out, and I agree with you completely, it may be a wise decision for one particular child or one family, whereas another family may benefit from staying at Newington Public Schools for the 6th grade year. So it's not half in and half out. It's the district, the board, needs to decide whether it wishes to pursue that. And we would be looking at enrollment trends coming through the grades to inform that decision, but also the prevailing factor that I mentioned about the contract. I can't speak for Portsmouth, but perhaps they might be willing to entertain a notion to include grade 6 in the future, and I believe I expressed that in my letter too. But it was a very good discussion at the meeting last week, and hopefully I tried to capture that in my reply to you.
Yeah, I'm sorry I couldn't go. It was a
That's
work,
quite all right. Yeah, make every meeting.
And sometimes not getting things from firsthand, you hear things differently, so thank you for that summary. You know, it's interesting that the contract is, what, 2024, and then all these other contracts are out of sync. For example, the collective bargaining and all these other things. Because certainly if a change is made, and I'm not saying one is gonna be made, but if it would happen, they would have to coincide time-wise. It would be a challenge to do
Yeah,
a change.
a tuition agreement with another district and a local collective bargaining agreement really do not interface. Kind of like a transportation agreement we have with a vendor. It's separate from the teacher's contract or the tuition agreement.
Because if everything
It's a
stays the
separate
same,
entity.
it's fine, but if some decision was made to change, then all these other things would get affected as well.
Okay, that's, that's up to the school board to decide, because it's an education issue. Of course, it would have some budgetary implications, and if that decision were made, then we would obviously entertain the budgetary implications. Any other questions relating to the school budget? John, sure.
I just had a small one. You notice there was $9,000 in custodial supplies, which I guess comes out to around $50 per day. I'm wondering what the custodian is spending $50 a day on. I mean, I guess I don't know what exactly they do. How do they run for $50 a day in supplies?
Yeah, I'm happy to speak to that. That is not just, to clarify, that's not just the paper towels and spray. Custodial supplies encompasses everything as far as the maintenance and running of the building, of different supplies, whether it's purchasing, each year purchasing new electrical cords because of safety hazards. You have to make sure you're replacing your cords and things like that. To that sort of safety equipment, as well as including all of the cleaning materials, the waxing of the floors, the stripper, and all of that, as well as the equipment needed to do that.
Huh. So does that actually include capital expenses, like buffers and stuff like that, or just the?
No, that's just this actual supplies. That would be an equipment item. If we went to go buy another buffer,
Yeah.
that would, but as far as the pads that you put on the buffer, it does include that.
Huh. Guess it adds up. Also, I noticed that, in terms of computers, it seems like you're anticipating, some new computers. Is that what this line item is? Because it looks like last year you replaced a bunch of computers, but now you're gonna buy a bunch of new computers too. So what's with all the computers?
Well, do you want to answer that, Mr. Pratt, or would you like me?
So part of keeping up with technology is making sure that devices have a rotation to them. And at all of our schools, we have decided that a 4-year rotation is the most optimal. Those devices stay relevant to changing technologies such as wireless, and it ensures that students and staff are getting good working units to support teaching and learning.
Right, I'm just saying, it just seems like a fair amount, so, like, even if you're spending, like, say, $2,000 per computer, at $14,000, that would be 7 additional computers, and you've got 18 teachers, so that would be.
At Newington, every student has a iPad, and in
Oh, so
grades.
this is including computers for students?
That's what that is.
Yes.
Oh.
So every student in grades 3 through 6 also have a MacBook.
Oh, I see, okay.
So we, prior to this, we didn't have, before Mr. Grattan stepped on board, we didn't have that oversight. So we're getting back on track, and now you're seeing us replacing a percentage of each of our hardware devices on an annual basis.
I see. So I guess tech contracted services, I guess we have to maintain all those, if you got like, 60 or 80 computers or whatever it is, you probably have a tech expense there as well, is that what?
So the tech contracted services are for some specific items such as additional wiring. Part of the technology line is additional wireless access points for next year.
Yeah.
That would include the need for us to be running network cables to power those.
Yeah.
In addition to that, there's also a probably around $2,000, I think, which is for network penetration testing, part of House Bill 1612, which governs our need to ensure data privacy and security institutes that we have to do what is called penetration testing every so often.
Yeah.
House Bill 1612 came into play in 2019. To date, we have not done a penetration test. This past year, we did a lot of network changes and restructuring, so this is the optimal time for us to have a third-party vendor come in and poke holes and see where our areas of weakness are.
I see. So if a kid starts having problems with their computer, which undoubtedly must happen quite a lot, how is that sort of paid for?
They call me.
Okay, so you're not, so that you sort of doing it ad hoc.
So as the technology director, I oversee the technology of all the districts, but I also individually provide service to Newington and Newcastle.
I see. So that's baked into the superintendent budget. I
So
see.
that's a great point. So through the chair, to answer the earlier question about what kinds of services the SAU provides, one of the senior staff, who is Mr. Grattan, Director of Technology, prior to his arrival, if the server went down at one of the schools or at the central office, we had to contact an outside vendor who might not respond within 24 hours. So basically, the whole system was shut down. Students couldn't operate, staff couldn't teach using technology. So more beneficial to hire an expert in that particular skill to answer the call and be on site within 20 minutes.
I see.
Has that happened at all this year, where we've had outages?
Just this morning, right? Was it this morning or yesterday morning at our school?
Yesterday morning, the storms that happened over the weekend caused one of the uninterrupted power supplies to tank. We had a secondary on site, but we just basically had to move some equipment plugged in, and now we'll have to replace that failed device.
That's definitely something that I would not have known to go look for or to do, so it's, I'm able to call upon the expertise of Mr. Grattan.
What about,
Jamie? Go ahead.
Okay, on this, page that has the pie chart,
Yeah.
right now, we're spending a lot of time nitpicking the, school's budget, making sure that they're, doing a fantastic, wonderful job. But if I look at this pie chart, there's $1.9 million in the SAU budget. What is the process that the SAU goes through to make sure that this 1.9 is an appropriate number? They have an equivalent sort of board like us that they have to answer to make sure that, all this stuff is happening, or we just sort of.
Well, the SAU office has no influence on the valuation of the town staff. So we are, in my 8 years as superintendent, hopefully we've been good stewards in managing our resources and asking for things that we need. Last year, there was a little bit of a spike a year ago when we proposed to the SAU Joint Board 2 new positions at the SAU office. One being the facilities manager that Ms. Penny has alluded to, and the second, a finance manager in the business office to provide added support to the business function at the SAU. Both of those positions resulted from an audit previously authorized by the SAU Joint Board. So we appealed to the Joint Board for 2 years to get additional support and staffing. I've often said that our building principals are educational leaders, they're not maintenance technicians. And the whole role, major role of education is just that, teaching and learning. We're lucky that Pete and his brother in Newcastle are very willing to roll up their sleeves on occasion, respond to emergencies, etc. But that's not their main function.
So I guess I'm trying.
I think I can answer your question.
So the SAU 50 is overseen by SAU Joint Board, and the SAU
Yes,
Joint
there's
Board is governing.
three board members in Newington, 3 board members, school board members in Newcastle, 5 school board members in Rye, 5 school board members in Greenland. So I often say I've got 16 bosses that I report to and 1 at home. So,
I'm just trying to understand who, like, who oversees that,
The joint
that
board
budget.
meets quarterly and decides and debates the SAU budget and votes on the SAU budget.
Thanks. I'm trying to understand the process.
So it's a committee of the whole when you do this, all 16 and you meet quarterly.
Correct.
Any other questions for the school budget?
Sure. Maintenance objectives, you get the line for 10,000, you haven't spent in 2 years. What's that open for?
For just that, any maintenance objectives that may come up, I think this year, moving forward, we're looking at, windows. We have 2 windows, the big windows on the backside that need to be replaced, as well as the windows in the 5th and 6th grade and 3rd and 4th grade room that are up on the roof, that need to be replaced as well. They're actually not tempered glass, and they're sitting above, so that's a safety gap.
And that doesn't come out of any kind of building capital reserve or major maintenance items or place windows or something like that?
Not at this time, no. We put it in the operating budget.
Do we have a capital reserve account for major
We do.
building repairs?
Yes, you do.
Major, yeah.
And it currently has $81,645.
How much was expended out of that this past year, if you don't mind?
Nothing this year so far in fiscal year '22.
Thank you.
Follow up on that, Brandon. What qualifies as major? Like, is there a dollar value that qualifies as major? Like, is there a qualifier, like, say, it has to cost $5,000 or it has to cost $15,000 before it becomes major?
I will say that the last time that I recall that was used was, primarily used for putting on a new roof on the building. Stripping down, putting on a new roof, I would qualify that as major, as well as, I believe, portions of that, correct me if I'm wrong, but were used when we had to replace our boilers
boiler, paving the parking lot.
and paving the parking lots.
Okay, well,
But there's-
to that point, we're talking about tempered glass windows that are large, you're talking major, rather
Generally,
expensive.
generally when something goes into the maintenance objective category, it's sometimes of almost like an improvement. So I know you were looking for a dollar.
So it's not
value.
to correct you, Mr. Waze, it's not the large triangular windows, they're the smaller ones in the back. So each one was about, they were just under, I think, $1,000 for each window.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Any other further questions?
Yeah, one other thing, Principal, I have to ask this question every year, but when you get the tuition students that come, they're paying the SAU, I'm assuming?
Paying the town.
Yeah, they pay the town, so that, Mark, that goes to the general fund?
Well, they pay, correct me, Stefan, it's not the town, they pay the the Newington School District.
Okay.
The Newington School District then goes into the revenue line, of our budget.
Okay.
Which then, would be then, ultimately, yes, go to the town. There's a step, you understand, like that step process to go there,
Right, but the revenues end up in the general fund of the town?
They've
At
ended
the end
in
of
the
the
general
day.
fund of the school, which offsets, so you have the appropriations that you need to raise. For every dollar that you have in revenue, that reduces what you actually have to, the town has to raise.
On the same fiscal year budget?
Correct.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you very much for that.
Okay, further questions? Are you ready to vote?
I probably. Just give me 1 second, please.
Okay. Yeah. Any other questions or any other witnesses?
You know, for me, we had a slight increase in the line for the grand total, right, 16,000, and I think in a year where you have the opportunity potentially to find some different funds from some different places, while our contribution as a town is going up by $80,000, which is not a small amount on 700 residents. I think potentially every little
piece that we can find to try to hold the line on everybody, every department is a good thing, and potentially there would be an opportunity for the school to use some of the funds that they have in a reserve fund to make repairs to the building, especially when it's in the thousands of dollars and it's anticipated. The major maintenance stuff that you have, it sounds like we've done quite a bit of it in the past few years, and that should be, those have dozens of years of longevity in them. I'd recommend that we reduce the line by, the total budget by $10,000. Or I'd make a motion to that effect to reduce the line, I can find it if you need it, of the maintenance objectives. Find this thing. You get a long budget.
Yeah, I know.
Page
It's
19.
4,600, it's 4,600.
Yeah. Page 19, everybody. To reduce that, well, we don't reduce the line, we reduce the bottom line.
That's correct.
I'd make a motion, consider the budget of, $2.3 million, $2,388,777.23, which is $10,000 less the,
Based on that one maintenance item.
based on that one,
So your argument is that it could come out of the capital reserve.
correct.
All right. Is there a second? Second from John. Any discussion?
So do we have a quote for that? Like, do you have a number for the windows, like an overall number?
Facilities director, yes, we had two glass companies come out
Yep.
and provide quotes that was based on that, and that's not just, so to be clear, that is not just necessarily for windows, that could be other maintenance, smaller maintenance objectives that come up too, that line fund. So windows is one part of that, it's not all just $10,000, it's a much smaller number than that, and then it's other smaller objectives that may come up that need to be fixed or dealt with within the school.
So I understand that, and without going through every single line, I would expect that that's not a maintenance objective, but you have a maintenance and repairs line item somewhere in here as well, right?
No.
There's no maintenance.
We do for certain things we do. Yeah, the window, that was just the window.
Objectives, I
Yeah.
consider the line item just as it says.
Yeah, for like doors, we have a maintenance repair for that, and those kind
Yeah.
of things. These are other things that are in addition to those.
Okay.
So,
It was four.
Good question. Yes.
Are you adding any money to the capital reserve this year?
No.
Yes.
so, sorry, do we have a number for the windows? Like, do we have a quote from, so you said that they came out, most, do you know roughly what the quote was for the windows?
It
10,000.
was approximately the 10,000.
That was that, sorry, I misspoke, that was the 10,000, that's
Okay.
just the window line, excuse me. Past years.
It's on page 42 of section 3, kind of at the top. It basically says window replacement, $10,000.
Yeah.
I'd like to tag off of that, you have a window repairs line for $2,000.
That's repairs. These are purchasing the windows and replacing them.
So those are different windows that you're talking about?
Correct.
Yeah. So that would fall under like annual repairs to the windows, screens, that sort of stuff.
Right.
Changing out,
Busted windows.
yeah.
Is there any good reason, Pete, why is there any real strong aversion to using the capital reserve fund for that $10,000 in window replacement?
Direct that question to the board, I guess, that would be.
I think the board's thinking in the capital reserve, those accounts are for unanticipated items that come up mid-budget year that we can't address. So big ticket items, and as Pete mentioned, over the years, we've had several of those. So we thought it wise to maintain those as a separate fund for big projects that need to come up, that need to be addressed by the school.
Good thought.
And we also, we do have a capital improvement plan, and we try to take things off as we find savings in other areas towards the end of the year, we try to address those capital improvement plans. But for the big stuff that goes bump in the night, that's our thinking.
My personal budgeting theory is that you should you anticipated expenditure if you budgeted that year and expended that year. I don't particularly like to use capital reserve as an unbudgeted grab bag. I'd rather have it for emergencies. And, you know, because you use it, and you gotta replace it, because you gotta be prepared for that blown boiler or something that you don't anticipate. So I'm happy with it. If you know what it is, you know, you got a quote, that's what it is. It's 10 grand to replace the windows. I have no problem. You know, and you say you're not asking for an increase in the capital reserve, so that's good. That's a good thing.
And $81,000 doesn't really go very far.
Oh, the capital reserve.
Yeah.
Have there ever been I mean, you guys may not have this information prepared, but have there been anything in the past 10 years, or, Pete, how long have you been at school?
10 years.
Is there anything in the last 10 years where you've expended, $40,000?
Yes.
The roof?
100, I think the roof was close to 200,000.
Gotcha. And that was out of the capital reserve
Yes.
for major repair?
That had been built up, to the
For
department
that
had
purpose,
cost.
right?
Yep,
That
for
was-
objectives.
Sorry?
So that was yes, we had, the roof was in desperate need of repair.
Right, so you guys planned that out and.
I don't-
Or that
I
wasn't-
can't- It
that
was
wasn't
prior to
cheap.
me coming, it was, I had been at the school for 3 years when the roof was repaired,
Okay.
redone. But it was following following a particularly large winter with snow loads and punctures in the roof and things like that,
I
so.
remember that one.
You know, I think I tend to agree with you, John, that it is that if you have an planned expenditure, put it in the budget, then we don't work with all these different, the problem is that that it feels like when you go through budget season year over year is that everybody, every single committee has these, I mean, there's millions of dollars out there that have been raised by tax funds that are sitting there, and I don't really wanna use it, I'd rather have the taxpayers pay for it this year. And at some point, you should be able to say, hey, over the last 10 years, this is what we've expended, this has been the surprise expenditures that have come out of that capital reserve fund, and it doesn't need to be funded at 81,000, maybe it needs to be funded at 50,000. The board went through this with the sewer department a couple weeks ago, where they have an enterprise rainy day fund that's at $1.3 million. And, we're waiting to hear tonight kind of where that really needs to be, because is it 10 million? Do we just keep funding into it? And so sometimes it's nice to say, hey, this is the cap that we should have on this capital reserve fund that is for rainy day issues that happen and jump up on us. Not like necessarily, I have a 4-year plan to replace the roof, but there's a hole in the roof and I need to repair it. And there should be some kind of a cap on there, otherwise, all the money keeps coming out of taxpayers, and these capital reserve funds are sitting there, and they're nice for everybody to hold. So, there's a dichotomy there, I can appreciate that, and I don't know what the right answer is, so maybe the board does. What do you guys think?
Let's find out. We have an amendment on the floor, it's specific to that line item to replace the windows. So, the amendment was to eliminate that $10,000 to replace the windows in the budget. All in favor of the amendment, which would be to eliminate the 10,000? Okay, 2, anyone else? All opposed? Okay, any abstentions?
I'll abstain.
Okay, so with, how many opposed? Vote your conscience here, you don't want to be too wishy-washy. How many are opposed? We got 3 opposed, 2 in favor.
You're asking for a post.
You're opposed.
Correct.
3 opposed, which means you're gonna leave it in there.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, I think the amendment fails then. Okay, are we ready to vote on the main budget? Okay. Good, all in favor of the main budget, which remains at $2,398,77, say aye. Aye, okay, any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, great, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Madam.
Yeah, now you can pass it, I don't wanna go into that in depth. What we wanna do is there's certain issues that we had and how particularly how the enterprise fund was managed. And Rick, you're gonna help us with that. And just, Rich, as you know, you can still vote if you choose to. You know, you're gonna step away from this table and represent. You know, in a small town, we all have to do double duty. We're in multiple boards. We're always voting in the interest of the public, not, you know, our own person. Okay, let me go, you know, you can sort of do your thing. I think the main issue we had was the operation and management of the enterprise fund. And some of the material you gave us answered a lot of my questions. But I think, and the board could certainly ask questions on it, I think, Rick, you would start with just a description of how you use the enterprise, how it's funded, how you use it, and how you make those decisions. That would probably be useful.
Okay, can you hear me? Is it on?
Just you. Yeah, okay, that works
Is it
out.
on? There it is. That works. So, I would like to run this video real quick.
Okay, yeah.
It kind of explains what we're looking at for a plant,
Yeah.
what we actually have there. A lot of people aren't aware of what's actually there. So we're gonna run this video real quick.
Okay, is this the PowerPoint or something else?
Yeah, it's behind
It's
you.
a PowerPoint right now.
Oh, okay, don't read every word.
There's no words, no sound.
Oh, no worries. Oh, it's a different PowerPoint than what I saw, thank God.
And there's no music either.
I was looking for a dramatic narration along with the thing you could provide that.
No, you're gonna look at every room in the plant.
Okay, well, that's helpful. Is that your swimming pool, right?
Yep. We were talking about that. This is the lab. The control room for the whole place is right here. This is way underground,
I was wondering about that. Okay.
the place no one ever sees.
That's the final product.
That's the water that comes out of the plant.
Goes from that to the clear water.
Is
Completely
that
clear.
considered tertiary or secondary?
Secondary.
Secondary.
So Gail, you can end it there. You don't have to do the rest.
Well, that was helpful. You
It
know,
tells you what we really have to do, and that's a lot of things there.
yeah, it's,
And if anything fails, we have to fix it right away.
I mean, it's easier than dragging us all through and doing the school, but I was impressed by the scale of the operation, which I think was the point you're trying to make.
Yeah, when I first became a commissioner, I had no idea what was underground. And going down those stairs, it's like another whole place.
Yeah, yeah. That's something I don't think we quite appreciated. I saw the stairs, I wondered whether you were starting at the tower or what.
Yeah.
So it was like two floors on the ground?
Yep. Yep.
Huh.
Yep.
Anyway, now, as I said, the board can make other questions. So, I'm gonna explain to you what I think what I saw, you could say that it sounds like with the enterprise fund, it's funded by an annual assessment on top of the sewer rate. Is that correct? So the ratepayers pay.
It's a ratepayer's money.
It's the ratepayers'
Just like
money.
taxpayers money. This is no
It's
tax.
a ratepayers' money.
It's a ratepayer's money.
And you decide on a percentage every year on top of the rate to go into the enterprise fund.
Yes,
And mostly that's designed for major breakdown.
yes. And it's based, the amount of money we have in there is generally based on what we budgeted.
Yeah.
There's no state rule to do it, but that's the accountant's general practice is to do that. And that general fund, that fund is used to, we have work done, major work done, so as the force mains, all those. We apply for loans, but the bill still comes to us, okay? So we pay for that out of that fund. We pay that bill.
Okay.
When the loan comes in, it gets reimbursed to us.
Yes.
Okay, but it's still, obviously, the bill hasn't been paid. So, but that's where a lot of that money is used. Because we're not gonna keep taking money out of the checkbook.
Right.
To pay for large expenses. In this packet, I gave a pretty good list of what, has actually, if you look under the major expenses, it's, there's a little star by all the things that came out of that fund, that maintenance fund. And those are things that didn't get reimbursed back in. They came right out to pay these things. Because we did, there's one thing, one of the force mains we got reimbursed for, the other one we did not. Okay? The force main we got reimbursed for was actually the one through the wetlands. It was expensive, and that was, if that didn't get done, we could be subject to a lot of fines.
Yeah.
So they've all been replaced with the latest pipes, which have a really long life, not like these pipes over in there. These were over 20 years old. Yeah. It's right behind you up there. Electrolysis eats those pipes up. Electrolysis doesn't eat plastic pipes, and that's what got put back in there. So a lot of these things we pay for out of that fund, you'll see here, they do not get reimbursed immediately.
So obviously when they get reimbursed, that money goes back into the fund. So it's like the town in anticipation of taxes, spend its fund down.
Right.
Now, in terms of adjusting the sewer rate, I read that you reduced the amount, one year you reduced the percentage that you normally collect for the enterprise fund to keep the sewer rates down.
Yes.
Which is reasonable. Do you ever use enterprise funds for your normal operating expenses?
No.
Okay. That was another question I think, in my mind, was a source of confusion. Okay.
Yeah, it's not part of the regular operating expenses.
So, which is always in the budget.
What is the appropriate target that you're shooting for to maintain in that fund? I see, you can probably take an average of all these numbers over the last 10 years and, that might give you some.
You want to at least have what your budget is for the year?
Yeah, 1 year's budget.
1 year's budget
Is
there. And we're a little bit over right now.
Yeah.
But that's generally the rule of thumb where you want to keep it.
So, Rick, and that's based on an accountant's perspective?
Yeah.
Okay, which is kind of an easy answer for an accountant to say. Is there ever a reason where you feel like your budget wouldn't get funded? I mean, that doesn't equate to anything, right? That's your operating budget.
Right.
The operating budget for your, let's say it's $1 million flat, somebody would say, well, you got $1 million in your rainy day fund, just in case, who knows? I guess that's a good place to put it. But you can't even, my other question is the operating expenses, you can't even use the enterprise fund for operating expenses right? Isn't that protected?
I'm saying, that's not what I told you.
Okay.
It's kind of used for operating expenses, and we have to pay a very large bill.
Okay.
Okay, It's much, we're not gonna take it out of our checkbooks to pay it. We have to enforce Maine, we can't take that out of our checkbook and pay for it.
Right, but that's like a maintenance thing, that's like something failed, we had to do this, it needs an emergency fund or something like that, but I thought from our meeting last time that you guys were in, that you can't use that enterprise fund for anything other than maintenance and equipment and et cetera.
That's not true.
Okay, it can
That's
be
not-
used for
That's
anything.
not true. It's the ratepayers' money, okay? It's put in there for emergencies in case we need it. We don't wanna buy it all down to make the rate go down. That wouldn't make any
Correct.
sense to do that.
Right, the opposite is, it doesn't make sense for the ratepayers to pay increased rates so that we can have this big enterprise fund.
We need the enterprise fund to make sure that nothing fails. We had a dramatic failure down there. How's it gonna get paid for? How would you pay for it?
Your enterprise fund.
Yeah. Yeah. The checkbook pays expenses, the normal expenses.
Yeah.
You had a catastrophic failure, you need that much money to fix probably what fails. It's a very expensive plant.
When you have a major failure, and you use the enterprise fund, that shows up in your reports in your adjusted budget.
Yeah.
So basically, it becomes an expenditure ultimately, because you've taken that out of the enterprise fund. But that's reported on an annual accounting. Okay.
So I think it's appropriate to have an enterprise fund, because you never know when these things are gonna happen, and you need to react quickly to fix something, obviously, and you don't know how much it's gonna cost until it's already done.
And keep in mind, this plant runs 24 hours, it never stops.
Exactly. So I think having an enterprise fund for those kind of things makes a lot of sense. The question is, how much money should there be in that fund? You said it's 1 year, it's like $1 million roughly, is that the idea?
Yeah.
Based on this history of,
What our budget is.
of these past failures, based on that experience, you think that's the right number, right? So once we achieve that number, that's great, but I guess my issue last week, or whatever, 2 weeks ago, whatever it was, is that part of the reason why we're being strict in putting you guys to think is that the word on the street is that the rates are too high, or higher than we would like them to be. I think we would everybody in this room would love to have the rates lower, but there's some things that are holding us from making them go down, whatever
The
they
major
are.
thing that's holding us going down is the amount of users.
Yes, so what I don't see here anywhere is we have a target, we'd like to reduce the rate by X percent, 5%, 1%, 10%, whatever the number is. And here's a plan to make it happen. I see some stuff, but I don't see a plan, I don't see a goal, and I don't see things that are gonna achieve that goal, because there's no goal there. How do you, don't we have a goal of reducing that rate? Am I wrong?
Well,
The problem is,
yeah,
it'd be great to have a plan to reduce the rate, which we know the EPA was gonna ask us to do this year.
Yeah.
If we don't,
We can make some education.
no, you can't. No, you can't. You cannot. Testing changes all the time. EPA standards are gonna change drastically. We don't know what they are. They don't tell us. We reduce nitrogen in the bay. Now we have to have it tested. We also just lost a testing facility that we used in Hampton. They're no longer doing business, so we're gonna find somewhere else. So it's very hard to have a target where you wanna be.
Just because things are hard doesn't mean you don't do them. You have to sort of have a goal and then work towards it. And so it's hard, okay? Do we not bother to have a goal of reducing rates by a number?
Okay, I think that maybe
5%.
we need to, in my view, there are two cost variables here. I mean, one is if you can think of a way of reducing your operating costs, which I assume you guys do, and that's what you're there for.
In fact, I'm presenting you with another budget tonight.
It's like fire departments. The other thing is that the plant has excess capacity now. You don't, so if you had more ratepayers, then the rate would go down. Because the cost would not go up nearly proportionate to the extra dollar. So that's probably the best answer. If you want to reduce the rates, find more customers. But anyway, yeah, go ahead.
I was just curious, do we have an idea of, how many, I think what might be helpful for Jeannie would be, how many more businesses, or, I know it depends on the type of business and how much they're using and things like that, but is there any sort of, like, hey, if we had, if the mall was filled, for instance, if there were no vacancies in the mall, what impact would that have on our sewer rate, because the users would go up? Do you know what I'm saying?
You know what the difference was?
I can't give you a quantitative thing, but it would go back to that, there'd be more flow, so it would lower the rate.
Right, no, I understand that, I'm just thinking in terms of, okay, how can we put this in more like black and white? If the mall was full, this is what it would look like. If we did this, this is what it would look like.
But the usage varies so much.
I know. I have one other question though, if I may, sorry. On the average sewer bills page, so we have 6 residential users that are paying the same rate as the commercial industrial. The average annual flow, is that from the 6 residential users, or where did that number come from?
That's the average flow from those 6 houses. Typically, like Rick today, his house every month uses 3 units. 2 people, 3 units, 2 adults. So that 80 is equivalent to a unit. So larger the household, more people in a household, that unit goes up. As you can see, or I have the list. One of them is extremely high. There's a parent and 2 children. They're going to use more water. It's water in, water out. Everybody's treated fairly.
And the water gets processed the same, whether it's a company or a resident.
And again, we all know, myself, I get phone calls, Rick, Skip, Tom, we have high rates.
So, back to Jamie's point, if that's all right, is, like if we were just, I think everybody's asking you questions because nobody really understands the way it operates and then also what's needed financially for it. As you guys as pros, do you have any recommendations on places that we can look to make this a little bit better? I think that's the concern of the budget committee.
So what I did, Brandon, what we did today, in fact, we looked over our budget again. With all the improvements we've made and spent the money on, we reduced our budget by quite a bit, $77,000. We don't have the new rate yet because of that. That has to be submitted. But the chances are it'll be lower than we have right now. And we'll try to keep doing that if we can. But the more businesses that come in, better it is for us.
Right.
There's more users.
And clearly, from my personal perspective, I'm willing to pay more if it's better for the bay, but that's just one person's opinion. And so, Newington's got the largest Bay Estuary coastline. It's always been incredibly, as residents, we've always really cared about the bay. And so, and I think what I'm hearing here is that we've got like a Class A plant, I know we've gotten awards for it.
Yep.
That to me is something, I think it depends on what your value system is. I'm not judging people if that isn't important to them. But I think sometimes if you want a Class A plant, you're gonna have to pay for it. And however, I do look forward to going to the budget because I think there's always ways to cut it. Could you talk a little more about why you feel that our sort of the processing of the sewer is better for the environment? What we have today versus the other communities.
a lot of it has to do with when it was done also. Okay? We're done with our plan for a while, unless they start to reduce even more nitrogen levels. A lot of towns didn't do that. They decided they wanted to fight the EPA and get a lower setting, so they didn't have to treat it as much. We didn't do that. I wasn't there when it was voted on, but not everybody wanted it to happen, including one of the commissioners, did not want it to happen, because they thought the ratepayers would have to pay. Well, where do you put the value? Do you spend the money and have a plant that's putting out almost clean water? In fact, I've talked to the board about doing that too. How much would it cost us to make that water back in the ground? Because it's all clean now. And that's probably something in the future that we have to look at, because that's what water is coming to. I don't know how else to answer you as far as.
I think maybe part of the question maybe you have is that, are we still ahead of the other towns in terms of meeting these EPA requirements?
That's my operator. Yes, we are.
We are, Portsmouth is coming online, Exeter, Newmarket, Dover continually improves their facility.
We sort of got there first.
Pardon?
We sort of we reached the standards first, which I understood. I was kind of proud of that, really.
Yeah. Like, let me just say, I have a new permit that, for total nitrogen of 12 pounds a week or a day to go out. We're down to 3. The plant was designed for 5. We're well exceeding that.
Okay.
So, but, like, Newington is part of the municipal management agreement for major testing that's done out in the bay. That your cost is about a little under $7,000. So, all those 12, 13, the 2 in Portsmouth and the ones that I just said are all part of it. And they all do their due diligence to get for that nitrogen.
So I guess I think we're at here is we've got and this is sort of beyond the budget, so I'll keep it quick. We have a great tax rate when you take a look at our tax rate compared to all those other communities that you discussed. Our sewer rates right now may be higher, but do we know, are they the highest in the state or in the seacoast?
Yeah.
Okay, they are.
Yep.
So I guess, has anybody done sort of an analysis that shows, yeah, you're paying more for your sewer, but the tax rate's lower, so overall, it's still a great place, to work and live and be a business in. So yes, it does take away from sort of the low tax rate from a business perspective, because they're gonna pay high sewer costs. However, every business is different, and I think there are some businesses that are gonna be impacted by our high rate more than others, right? I mean, I think of one in particular. But they're not all that one business, right? I mean, there's other businesses that may use less sewer. So I guess what I'm trying to get at is, I think wherever we can lower it, if we can lower, we should strive to do that, but I don't think our hair shouldn't be on fire, because we have a high sewer rate, when you have to look at the big picture and everything else that the town is offering. So, and I realize I got us on a little track there, but it's not just about the sewer.
It is not just about the sewer. I'll speak up on that one. I will tell you, I feel the most responsible for it, listening from before the new plan came in, because all that I've ever proceeded with in this committee is, and John, hey, ratepayers pay it. No impact to the taxpayers in the town of Newington, and we should do this, and this is, and I think everybody on the board at that point stamped it and said, hey, that sounds great, good for you guys, be the leaders, it's excellent, and I don't think any of us took a second hard look at it and said, well, this probably does affect us here, and I take some responsibility for that, which I think is why I'm more passionate about the situation here. But this is not catastrophic to the town of Newington, that sewer rate's high, I completely agree with you. The only other part on the enterprise fund, Rick, that you were talking about is, it's my understanding that all the money that gets budgeted and appropriated to the sewer department, that does not get spent, gets put into the enterprise account at the end of the year, right?
Not all of it. Some of it does.
And where does the rest of it go?
Stays in the checkbook.
Stays in
You have two,
account.
if I may, you have 2 sheets. You have one that says checking account 214, has color blue,
Thank you very much.
And then the other one, of course, is the enterprise fund.
So when I was looking at the budget though, Rick, 2 weeks ago, my thought was, if we've underexpended lines as recently as last year to tens of thousands of dollars, maybe we ought to, if the operating, if you want the enterprise fund to operate at 1 year's budget level, 1.3 million, which it happens to be at, and our budget's at, you just submitted at 1.292, so 1.3 million. What we wanna do is draw those categories down to as close as possible, because we don't need to be contributing to that. And I respect that you came back and looks like you found a considerable amount of money that's different, by $70,000, as you mentioned before, so thank you for doing that.
One thing I noticed too, in addition to the 70,000 savings, they did reduce the effective sewer bills, and the enterprise fund was larger than it needed to be. Because you reduced, rather than adding 7% surcharge, you added only a 1% surcharge.
This year, there was no
There was
surcharge.
No surcharge, so that's a way of doing what you're proposing, really.
I would like
Yes.
this, when we, me personally, I'd like to see the surcharges go away. So you're not having unexpected things when you get your bill. It's like, oh, now there's a 2% surcharge.
Right.
That was anticipating these, paying back these large loans. Okay, that's why it was done. But as we get closer to realizing some of the new things we did, the different motors that we replaced, a lot of the upgrades we did, we're gonna see a savings on that. So that's why we reduced the maintenance fund, because I don't think we're gonna be using it.
Yes.
Rick, if you could just walk me through it, is there any other way money gets into the enterprise fund other than what's left over? That is it, so funds marked for sewer, at the end of the year, you figure out what you're gonna put to the enterprise fund, and that's the only way that really gets funded.
Yeah.
And that's our force main just went, we gotta spend $1 million fund, basically. Am I understanding that correctly? Like, if you have to do a large project, that's where you're getting your money from.
Then we got some of it.
Okay.
We did, the force main, we were able to, half the force main project, through the most expensive part of it was through the wetlands. That was done through a loan. Okay, we got a loan for that. Fortunately, the first one we paid for it. It was over $400,000.
Right, so, but I mean, if you have large expenses that come up because of pipe breaks in the middle of winter, and you gotta get out there and dig it all up, that's where your money's coming from.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Any further questions? I'd like to move on to the warrants. We've discussed this budget before. I feel better with your presentation tonight. Thank you for coming.
Well, I want to thank you for letting us have another shot at it, so.
We need to vote on the bottom line of the budget. Are we prepared to do that now?
I think we need a motion on the budget because the number changed.
Is there, I've got my sheet here. What's the bottom line we're voting on now?
They reduced it by like 75 grand, 77?
77,000.
I got it here somewhere. What's the bottom line?
1,292,491.
That's it.
Okay, good. Is there a second? Is that your motion?
Yes, sir.
Second, we have a second. Any further discussion?
I just have one brief question.
Yes.
What is the EPA upgrade line item?
What is it?
Yeah.
What do you have to do for them this year so far?
Testing for PFOAs, I mean, there's always things that they come, like, I'll give you another one, the flood. There's a $10 surcharge per ton for the state of Maine. That's really just a line item, that's why we reduced it. We used to carry 100,000, now we're down to whatever that, I can't.
So it's a line item to cover unexpected EPA charges?
It's not always unexpected. We do know what some of them are, yes.
Oh.
Yeah.
So various known and unknown
Various known and unknown.
EPA
We don't know what they're gonna throw at us.
related costs.
Yes.
I was a bureaucrat. It doesn't get possessive.
That's how a lot of these agencies work. We're the little guy. They just say, oh, well, by the way, you gotta do this now. You gotta do it by this date, or you gotta have this testing, so.
So we ready to vote? All in favor? Aye. Recommending the budget onto the public hearing, okay, any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, thanks again, guys, for coming back.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dennis. Thanks, Rick. Okay, I think we can, anybody need a breather, or are you ready to move on to the one? Okay, let's go through the ones, and we'll try to move these as quickly as possible, to take one at a time. I'll need a motion on each warrant, and a second, we'll discuss it, vote on it, and we'll go to the next one. Okay, so the first one, $200,000 to be placed in the vehicles operated by the fire department. Okay. We got a second on that? We got a second? Any discussion on the replacement vehicle fund? This is the deal agreement. Any discussion on that? If not, we could vote. All in favor? Again, we're voting to recommend this fall into the public hearing. Any opposed or abstentions? One opposition, okay. Good. Did you get that? The opposition? John? Okay, good. Collective bargaining agreement, this is a big one. And this is based on the fire department. Do we have people from the fire department here?
Yes.
There you are, okay, great. What is the percentage of that? I mean, when you were negotiating, these bottom line figures were based on some percentage increase, and what were they? Do you remember?
Are you talking overall percentage, pay scale
Well, it's
percentage?
basically an individual firefighter who's at a certain pay level negotiated a new contract that paid him more money. What was that percentage increase the first year and each of the succeeding years?
Well, so it's very dependent, firefighter to firefighter, because there was a lot of language cleanup that needed to happen in this contract. So Newington Fire Department was one of the only fire departments that didn't pay people based on an EMS certification. So a paramedic would make the same money as a basic EMT. So one of the big things in this collective bargaining agreement was fixing that to align with the other area departments. There was also a fairly large adjustment in the pay scale in general to keep us competitive, which I believe you have a sheet in there which compares us to some of the other surrounding towns and the average. So the pay scale, as it kind of went through, it's called the 8% pay scale because that's kind of that overall, but to say that it was an average of 8% for each employee, there's too many different numbers to calculate each employee independently. Does that make sense?
The average was an 8% increase.
In the first year. Is
The
what
first
that-
year. And
Yeah.
what will be the percentage, now you level the playing field.
Correct.
What's the percentage in each of the?
So they negotiated a 2% COLA for the next 4 years on top of a step, and it's essentially matching the police step scale, 2.5 or 2 3/4% step.
2.5 or 2?
Yeah, I'd have to rerun the math on the exact step.
Was that step scale in place before?
So there was a step scale in place before. There was no consistency between steps. So some steps were less than a 1%, some steps were as high as a 4%. So I can't speak to it, I wasn't involved, I don't know anything about it.
Standardized the percentage.
All of the percentages are exactly the same across the
And how many
board.
steps?
10 steps.
Okay.
Correct.
All right.
You should have that pay scale in your packet of stuff also.
Okay, so we're looking then at an 8% average increase.
So the one thing to be said to that is none of the firefighters have had any increased COLA or wages since 2019. So that 8% is
Okay.
from 2019 to
So
2022.
they got no COLAs
No COLAs, no steps since 2019.
or steps since 2019.
Correct.
So this is gonna take effect in 2022,
Correct.
this year.
Correct.
Okay, so let's see. So 19, so 2021, there was 2 years, basically.
3 years, this would include 22, so this would be the 3 years would be the 8%. Yeah.
Okay, so they went without increases for 3 years?
This would be the third year, correct?
22?
Yep.
Okay, so this.
Does that make sense?
Well, no, because it says year 2022 was spending 181,000.
Correct. Correct, so what I'm saying is
But that 8% increase is based over the 3 years of 19, or
20, 21, 22.
Well, I think you need it, so it's.
2 years without and then the
So it's a
year to make
three-year
it.
package, divide by three, it comes out to 2 and 3.
Correct. Yeah,
Okay, I got it, all right. Good.
Got a question.
Okay, hang on, let me sort this out. So then the steps are, the COLA is 2% over the contract.
For 23, 24, 25, and 26, correct.
Okay, good. Okay, Tammy?
I guess the question is, these are fixed rates, these are not based on what the economy is doing. If the
Correct.
economy goes up 5%, you still get 2%. If
Correct.
the economy stays flat, you get 2%. It's 2% no matter what the economy does.
So this year,
There's no,
so this year the COLA is 3%, they're only getting 1.
right, it has not, those two are not
Correct.
correlated
Correct.
in any way.
Correct.
Is there any, if I can ask, is there any comment or input from the Board of Fire Engineers on this? I know you guys probably were involved with negotiating this in the CBA, but it says you approve it 3-0.
Yes, I was on the negotiating team. I am a fire engineer, and yes, we do approve this. John Clanchester was also the other negotiator from the Board of Fire Engineers. And yes, it was approved. And what I can tell you, our focus was to remain competitive. We started off with a standardized pay scale and then negotiated in the increases that we would sustain, so it's a known quantity. The other thing that we did, it's a 5-year contract. The prior contract was 3. We went up to 5. To nail that down so we know what we're talking about. Retaining employees through pay and benefits and work environment is most important to us, and it is working.
Okay, you answered the same question I asked the school board. You know, you negotiated good contract, good faith, you represented the taxpayers.
Yes.
And you feel that this is a proper contract. And
Yes, I
you
do, and I will
recommended-
tell you, there was give and take.
Yep.
The prior contract does not look like the new one. The new one does include, vacation buyback, that is one item. And that is an item that has been extended to, town employees as well.
Yeah.
Because surrounding communities have it, and we have wanted it, and the cost savings is evident. We've demonstrated that.
Yeah, saves over time.
I was gonna say, there should be an explanation in your packet about the employee A, employee B, and the cost savings associated with the fire department, specifically in a vacation buyout aspect.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Any other questions regarding this labor contract? Yeah.
How many vacation days are there typically? I noticed that's not really covered by the summary.
So it depends upon the years of service. The vacation days were originally defined in the town personnel manual. Due to the hours worked for a firefighter being a 24-hour shift, there was an adjustment in the contract. So an employee once a month, a new employee for the first 3 years accrues half a day, half a shift, so 12 hours a month. So they theoretically accrue 6 days a year. And then it exponentially increases based on their years of service with a very similar mirroring to the personnel manual. The hours are just adjusted based on the work hours.
So is that 6 days in addition to a base?
No, that's,
Oh, so you start with 0?
They start with 0. So in the first year of employment, they're not allowed to use any vacation leave. They're on probation, no vacation leave is allowed.
So after 5 years, they're up to 3 years?
Yeah, well, so they can carry over a maximum of 240 hours per year, which works out to 10 days. But that's no one, a
Then
senior
I'm asking
employee, and
how
that's,
many vacation days, say, a 5-year man gets?
what?
So a person who's been employed for 5 years, how many vacation days? do they have?
So a 5-year employee would accrue 14 hours a month, so essentially, what's that?
160 hours or 8 days.
Right.
8 24-hour shifts.
Right, so eight days a year. based on their work schedule. But they can only,
8 24-hour
Like 8
shifts.
days per year, so that'd be 40 days, or?
no, eight shifts per year. They work- yeah, 24-hour shift.
I think an explanation should be the difference in the hours the fire work.
Correct.
They don't work a 40-hour week.
Correct, so all of our firefighters work a 42-hour work week, but they work 24-hour shifts. So if they wanna take Tuesday off, they're burning 24 hours of leave for Tuesday. It creates kind of a weird, thinking about it in the normal work environment, taking a week off or taking a day off. It's a little bit different because when they take a day off, they're off for the next 2 days after that to begin with. So they really get 3 days when they burn a 24-hour shift. So it kind of calculates the same. It's a very complicated mess with the work schedule.
We get it. Let's
Yeah.
say they average 42 hours.
Correct.
And the shift is 24 hours, and if they take time off, it has to be a full shift or?
Half shifts, the minimum is 12 hours.
So they can do a half shift?
Correct.
Okay, all right.
So follow up to that, what happens on the 11 paid holidays?
They work. So our firefighters contractually get paid holidays whether they work or they don't work, because trying to calculate that out would be impossible. So when they work Christmas, they receive no extra pay. Everyone gets paid for the holiday. They get 8 hours of pay for holiday, which is paid twice per year.
Okay, so in fact, the person doesn't actually get 11 holidays, they just get some fraction of that.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. They get some additional pay to associate the holidays.
Any other questions on this one? Okay, I mean, payroll is our biggest expense in this thing. And this is expensive. Are we ready to vote on this? All in favor of recommending this forward to the public hearing? Say aye. Okay, any nays or abstentions? Okay, good, thank you. Okay, number 3, Article C is going to put $100,000 in the major road work capital reserve fund, which is previously established. Any questions on that? Go ahead. Emily, go first.
Should we move it first?
Oh, do you want to move it?
Sure, I'll move it.
Okay. Emily, got a second, okay. Now,
Now,
thank you.
what's the current balance on this?
368,000 roughly.
And I thought I heard at the selectmen meeting back in the fall that maybe some of the grant money from, the federal grant money from the pandemic was gonna be put into road work, is that true?
That was discussed, $50,000. We were actually talking about Eversource, I believe, has given the town $50,000, and that did go into road work.
So that's included in that
But
368?
this major road work, no, there hasn't been any funds proposed from the ARPA funds. Those still sit in the general fund right now.
Okay, and the 368 includes the 50,000 from Eversource?
It's, the 50,000 is actually separate.
But it shows up in the town budget on the revenue side.
Right.
Okay.
What did you put in last year for this? And like, what's the rationale for proposing 100,000 versus 50 or 75 or?
Right, it was 132,000 last year, and in the capital improvement plan, under the highway tab, which I believe for you is 15, there's a major roads capital improvement plan. The next large expenditure, we believe, will be Shattuck Way. The board has been able to delay the paving of most of Shattuck Way. Currently, we're waiting for the Air Force to complete moving of some large equipment over Shattuck, so we didn't want to do the paving until that's complete.
Part of the issue is that we normally do the selectmen and highway budget first, and then we do the warrant articles, right? So I think we'd be a little more educated than seeing this cold, which is why I asked the question.
because we've already gone through that. So, but it's just, it is what it is.
Yeah.
So,
Also, Martha, it's helpful on these, is you, if you put the current balance, and you did that in the past sometimes, when we're putting money into a capital reserve fund, we know what the balance is
Right,
current.
right.
But anyway, we're fine for now.
Also helpful to have an idea of what target we're trying to aim for.
Sure, that's it, like, how much is this paving for sheriff and, you have a rough idea?
Yes, 338,000.
All right, good, that explains it, all right.
And why is that not in the highway resurfacing line of 295?
Highway resurfacing, that includes our town roads, our, Nibble Hill, Little Bay, the roads on the residential side of town,
Only.
for the most part, yes.
Well, that's news to me.
And the major roads are your Gosling, Woodbury, Piscataqua, Shattuck.
Can I ask another
Okay.
question? So,
Can I just address that?
Yep.
You know, major road work capital reserve does not mean the major roads in town, that means major road work, right?
Yes, and in the past, you're right, it has been used for other than just the major roads.
Right, okay. So is what you're saying, Martha, that the capital reserve fund is used for our major roads, Woodbury, Shattuck, McIntyre, and the resurfacing line item for the RPC is strictly for the village roads that are 20 foot wide or less?
We are trying to maintain that plan, yes. McIntyre, however, falls under the highway resurfacing.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so,
Is it appropriate to have?
Brenda, sure.
So-
I said Emily said full.
there's 338,000 in there currently, right? Is that what we said, or was it?
368.
368, sorry. I misspoke. So 368 in there currently. We have that other $50,000 that's hanging out, right? That's available to be used.
Last year was spent on Nimble Hill Road, completing that paving project.
Not spent money, though.
Right.
Okay. So we have 368, and we're proposing, you said Shattuck Way is what's gonna be paved. And then after that, I mean, I guess my question would be, 330, I know where the 338 came from now. You said it was gonna cost 338,000 was the quote for the paving, but we have 368 in there currently, so I guess my question is what's coming down the pipeline that we're gonna need another $100,000 in there for?
We have Piscataqua planned, right now it's scheduled for 2024. That'll be an additional 327,000. The Woodbury Avenue right now is on the plan for 2026, that's $442,000. And the,
Woodbury Ave just completed by the New Hampshire DOT right before we took it over?
it was, and the life of a road is typically about 10 years. So we'll burn through those 10 years,
In
close to
2026?
that, 8 to 10.
So basically, it's a savings account.
Good.
The old Christmas account, you're saving up for these big projects. Okay. I mean, given those projections, it does, $100,000 doesn't sound unreasonable. Stretch it out as long as you can.
Can I ask another question?
Yes, go ahead.
It has to do with, so I know we're not talking about the resurfacing line item or the road surface maintenance line items right now, but we crack sealed and then we paved, which doesn't seem like a good use of money, this year, down past the dump. So I'm just curious, what happened there and what, I mean, I know this isn't necessarily related to, and I don't know if you want me to wait for this question, but, I think we're talking about roads and we're, trying to decipher what budget's where. Can you speak to what happened there? Because that seems frivolous.
Yes, there was a section of Little Bay that needed to be paved. It was in really bad shape. We were hoping to put it off longer. The crack sealing is supposed to extend the life of the road, of course. But in this case, this was one of our seriously deteriorated roads and needed to be completed. If you look at all of the crack sealing that was done in town, I think you'll find that the majority were not and will not be paved over.
We've extended the life of the road,
Right.
now we're just deteriorated beyond what we thought it was.
We are gonna have highway.
We will, yeah,
budget.
we'll have that practice
That's
next
the
week.
problem,
And we'll-
usually we would normally have the.
Yeah, right.
Right,
We have that.
Well, we will be revisiting this public meeting too, right? Once we get our information, so.
Any
So do
further-
we work with Northeast tonight, I guess, since we haven't talked about the road budget or the highway budget?
Well,
I don't want to throw most of my
Yeah, I mean,
questions.
it's mostly a matter of time, you know, so we need to do these, and then, because we'll take all that time for the selectmen, not that we can't go back to the after.
Okay.
So any further discussion on this one? We're at Article C, okay, we're ready to vote? All in favor of Article C? Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? Okay, great. Now we're down to Article D, and this is $50,000 for the town ambulance and major medical equipment fund. Any questions or comments on that? Can we get a motion for it?
So moved.
Okay, a second from Jennifer.
How much is in the fund?
Ambulance currently has $236,424.
What's the cap we set on that, EJ, do you remember?
There wasn't a cap on that because we're due to replace the ambulance in 2 years, actually, just over 2 years.
And how much does the ambulance cost?
The last estimate with equipment I got was $425,000.
I think what we said last year, Jen, was that we can slowly fund
Yes.
this one.
And if it's possible to make sure we have enough money in there, as if we have to, everything looks on track and we could possibly push it out an extra year to try and build up that fund.
Right.
Okay, yeah, Rick.
You bought another diesel?
More than likely, we'll be buying a diesel, yes. I will say that there's been a little bit more conversation on that recently on some discussion boards, because of a new Ford gas motor, has the fairly comparable horsepower and torque, but there's some concerns on longevity. So we have a couple more years before we have to get to that point. The upkeep of the diesel, we've been very fortunate with our Dodge that we haven't had any major upkeeps, but that's the biggest concern with the diesel engine currently is the upkeep of the emissions there. So we'll be evaluating that at the time of purchase as to what's gonna be the most cost effective down the road.
Thank you.
Any other further discussion on D?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
Chiefs, is there anything that is a qualifier for any major medical? Is there a qualifying dollar amount or a qualifying item? I know medical.
We
is
try,
very
so
expensive,
the line item for our EMS equipment isn't huge, it pretty much maintains our small stuff, you know, the Band-Aids, the ice packs, that type of stuff.
Right.
So the major medical stuff would be like the life packs, IV pumps, depending on where we're getting it from, but I mean, one of those life pack monitors is $30,000.
I don't know when this account was established, if there was a dollar amount set to that. Our general rule is it needs to be a minimum over 5,000. At the time that I've been here, I don't think we've ever spent less than 15,000 for a single item out of that line. But I don't know when the account was established, if there was a hard set number or not.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, any further discussion on D? All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? None? Okay. On to E, $20,000 for library building capital reserve fund. Okay.
I make a motion.
Okay, this is, any questions on that?
I'll make a motion.
Sure, okay, good. Do we have a second? So the motion is to recommend going ahead. Library building capital reserve fund. The selectmen, I see is 0, 0. You recommend that one way or the other?
Actually, last night, the selectmen did vote to recommend this article.
Okay, is,
I'm sorry, I didn't catch who made the motion on this.
Emily.
And
Emily.
I second.
Okay. The library building capital reserve, 20,000. Do we know how much is in it now?
I show around $12,000.
12, so it's pretty low, okay. All right. Any further discussion? You can vote. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed or abstentions? None. Okay, thank you. Article F is 15,000 for replacement of vehicles operated by the highway department. A lot of vehicles here. How much is it on that?
We have, $429 roughly.
429?
You'll recall the highway department just purchased a new backhoe.
Oh, sure, okay.
They ended up buying a new backhoe, Martha?
Yes, it's a case. It's in your,
It's brand new, though?
It's not brand new.
Not brand new.
They bought a used one.
sorry.
Good.
Didn't have any hours on it.
Didn't have any hours?
Didn't have many,
Oh, many.
low hours. Okay, any further discussion on that? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Or abstentions? None observed. Okay, thank you. Under G is $10,000 for town recreational facilities reserve fund. Okay, recommended by the selectmen. Any questions on that?
How much is in the fund?
Roughly 36,000.
How much did we put in this last year? Did we have something from last year?
So I don't believe we put any money in it last year.
Is there a need for $45,000 in recreational facilities and equipment?
The committee was concerned about the condition of the tennis courts, and we're hoping to upgrade them, do some further repairs.
When you say upgrade, you mean maintain? What do you mean by upgrade? Or do you mean maintain?
I should have said repair.
Okay.
Yeah, there are some cracks that need to be repaired.
Any estimates on how much that costs? I know you're not on the rec committee.
Under $10,000. I believe.
Okay.
That's the last quote.
Did we make a motion on this?
No, we haven't.
Okay, I would make a motion.
I'll second it.
Okay, so the motion is in the affirmative to recommend. Is any further discussions on that one?
We got $10,000 that needs to be spent to repair the tennis courts and a $36,000 balance. I don't understand why we would pay $10,000 for the repair of the tennis courts. We already paid for it, it's already made for taxation.
Is it possible to table this until is that the exact number, or can we table this until we know the exact number?
Is this related to Article N?
This is G.
Article G.
I know.
Oh, is it related to?
But there's another,
No, I don't believe so. If you're talking about the rec director?
There's the additional equipment for the playground behind town hall. So you're right, those are two different things. They want 25,000 in that article for new playground or additional playground. They want 10,000 for the tennis court.
and then a rec director.
Fix up the baseball field.
Yeah, right.
Thank you.
And there was a fix up the baseball field behind the school. And the fields from the recreation committee said that nothing's been done there for several years. It's all, should be graded and fixed up.
Is that,
Yeah, we went there to go pitch my son, and he almost got bit by, whatever bugs were living, flying around out of the pitcher's mound, so.
I guess the question is, $36,000, right? So if there needs to be some field work and some tennis work, that, I'd like to understand, what are the bids for those two projects? Because 36 seems like there's enough in there.
We'll get a budget to the committee.
Can we table that one, Chairman?
This
Not that it matters.
Article G?
Yes, sir.
Until we can get the quotes from Martha.
Okay, sure. Let's move on quickly next week, though, we'll do that. So, all in favor, we have a second on tabling? Okay, there's a second. All in favor of tabling this till next week? Okay, good. Article H is $10,000 for police computer equipment. Any questions on that one?
Yep, first of all, I'll make a motion.
Yep, you're right.
Affirmative.
Is that a motion?
I'll second.
There it is, a second.
Balance of the funds, any questions?
10,000,
You got 10,000 in it?
yes.
Okay, you need 10 more?
Is this part of a bigger plan, chief?
Yeah, and I want to cap it out at 35. We have a server that we need to replace and some other computer equipment. And the server's looking at, we have to replace within the next year or two. And we're working with Daystar, our IT company, to work on that and see how we can do it.
Thank you.
So this is a $30,000 server?
That includes additional computers within the police department.
Okay, what kind of server is this?
I have no idea. I can get back to you on that.
I mean, is it a technical server for some technical purpose, or is it personal computer server?
No. It's for the IT, the big picture of the PD. It's a whole big server. I'm not an IT person, but I know it's in its own little place that runs all the computers at the PD. Is that possible?
Now, this will be purchased out of the capital reserve that you put in on the pool.
I'm sorry?
I mean, this computer you're gonna buy down the road out of this capital reserve fund.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
The server.
Yep, the server. Any further questions on H? Not, are we ready to vote? All in favor of recommending this forward? Aye, any,
Oh, those
one opposition, any abstentions? No abstentions, one opposition. Okay. Next one is establish a capital reserve fund, historical preservation capital reserve fund to purchase the town's historical, okay. For the purpose of preserving the town's historic documents and Athenia and making them more accessible to the public, and further to raise and appropriate the sum of $10,000 for the Historic District Commission as agents to expend said fund. Okay, we've discussed this a couple of times before. It's basically a fund to preserve our documents.
So I think,
Okay, it's preserving the town's historic documents in FEMA, which is physical stuff. So the historic documents in FEMA, not financial documents per se, but the historic documents in FEMA. Okay, you got a motion to, this is a motion to approve, is there a second to approve and move forward?
I will second it.
We have a second? Okay. Any discussion? Okay, I notice we have a member of the Historic District Commission here. Lou, would you want to explain this?
What this is when the HDC came forward with our budget, we were starting to create an inventory of all of the photos and archaeological studies and whatever that we have in the historic archives. But all that literally is going to give you is a big long list of what exists, what box it's in, and where it's located. But if you want to make that information accessible to people, you want to have information, scans of documents, scans of photos that you can put up on the internet, or that you can back up so that you have, backup copies of the very precious originals. So the concept of this is, in order to go to that next step, there's going to have to be money spent on computers, scanning the documents, and making them accessible in a digital fashion. So for instance, any of those historic photos that you have back there, we might have 400 photos. But those should be, the townspeople should be able to look at those anytime they want to. Right now, there's no way that we can make them accessible. So we thought we'd start this year and plan for something that probably would be 2 to 3 to 4 years out, depending upon how successful we are with the inventory.
Any questions?
Have you considered, any sort of a technological solution like Amazon? There's a lot of these companies that you ship them out, they do it for, it's dirt cheap. You ship the boxes out, it's insured, and they put it on a disc for you and you have it, as opposed to, and it's not $10,000, although I honestly don't know how much we actually have that would need to be loaded.
We haven't got to that point. That's where we would get to the point to getting quotes for whatever that system would be. I imagine over the next 1 or 2 years, we're going to be creating inventory. Then we can take portions of that inventory, mostly starting with the easy stuff like photographs, and we can, at that point, see how are we going to handle it.
They do all that for you, is what
Yeah,
I'm trying to say.
they
You
do
give them a box full of all kinds of stuff, and they take care of all of it for you. And then I guess another question I had is, how is this, or is it different from the $3,500 that we approved in the budget? Because I think, didn't the budget also include, I know it was for a person, but I thought that we talked about this previously when you came before us.
So what that is creating an inventory. So when I open the closet and there's 40 boxes looking at me, we need to open up each box and say, here's the contents that we have, and create an inventory. But that's when I said the inventory is just going to be a whole long list of photos on a piece of paper or in a computer. But that doesn't make things accessible to the public.
No, I appreciate that, but it just feels like it's duplication, because I think we approved 3,500 in that budget, and now this is an additional 10. So
Well, that budget, for instance, if this is the inventory all done, 3 years' work, here's the inventory. That budget would be, okay, now we have to either buy the equipment, or we have to find a vendor that will do the scanning, or we have to create our own website, or find a vendor that will host it. So you're either going to be paying for computer equipment, or you're going to be paying for services to process your photos and put them up on a website. We're not to that point, but that point's realistically going to be in the $25,000 to $35,000 range.
Yeah, I don't see that. I actually, have done a little bit of this work in a previous life, and it's nowhere near that kind of money. They're really, these, organizations actually replace what you're talking about. It's much, much cheaper. So.
Lulu, it sounds like we're at the little, over here, sorry, this thing. It sounds like we're at a little bit of the beginning of that process for you folks, where you're not sure, which way this could go, if the 10,000 is going to be enough, if the 10,000 is too much, that kind of thing. Would it be all right to consider, kind of getting a stronger hold on what exactly your plan is for the money, and then revisiting this in the next year's warrants? I think it's a really good cause, and it's probably a really good place, and I think that people are pretty lucky to have somebody, or citizens, I should say, multiple, who want to take on a project like this. But to spend the money, to spend $10,000 on create a new warrant and a new fund, when we don't, it sounds like we're kind of at the beginning stages, is something I would say to every committee.
Here's the dilemma that I have. The HDC budget has historically been less than $5,000 a year. I came before the budget committee for this project, and we did get $3,500 for working on inventory. I just spent $5,000 of my own money to buy the computer, to buy the software, to buy the scanner, and to buy archive boxes and supplies. And I'm committed to trying to get this intern trained. So much money and effort, volunteer time goes into this, and the town does not fund it. So, I have a problem saying, let's wait, because it's underfunded today. Now, it is my computer, yes, but still.
So,
bids and
I
how
mean,
many
if
bids.
we started with 10, and maybe Jennifer would help you find good vendors, maybe the following year you won't need as much. Because this is sort of a savings account, right? You're not gonna,
This would, it is like a savings account. I would be, if I had to estimate right now, because on the inventory, we said, we're probably not gonna have more than 1,000 boxes. But we could well have in the 100,000 numbers of items. So when you start thinking of, you're not gonna make all of them accessible, but you're gonna make 20,000 of them accessible. So when you then say, how much is an outside vendor going to charge us to process that and to do it? It's not $1,000, it's definitely closer to 30,000. I mean, it's not cheap.
okay. But anyway, if you started with 10, it turned out to be only 10, and you wouldn't have to come back next year and ask for another 10, if you knew that much by then.
True. 3 years from now, when we come back, we
Good.
would say, well, gee, it's gonna cost us 40,
Well,
maybe
good.
20, I mean, I don't know.
I mean,
Yeah.
the inventory will help too,
Absolutely.
and you could start that, this year, how long it will take, that'll be helpful. Okay, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I'm just struggling because I feel like we got to a decent place with this kind of project at the meeting where you presented, where we talked extensively about this, and we discussed, you know, kind of coming to a middle ground of some money to get the project off the ground and running, and now we're, you know, we're beyond the 7,000 that was originally asked for, we're at 10,000. I'm really struggling with that. We wouldn't, and in terms of process, you know, making a list, I don't know, I can't see, you wouldn't make a list of something and not organize it as you're going, I guess, is what I'm struggling with too. And my last comment is the Historic District Commission would be the agents to expend on this, is that correct?
Would be the,
Agents to expend?
this is their proposed language, the selectmen have not voted on, you know, how it'll end up on the warrant, but they have agreed that it'll go on the warrant.
I can help you a little bit on that, Emily, because nobody has worked in these documents now for at least 25 years. Barbara Hill, 25 years ago, put a lot of time and effort into it. Of course, when you go through these boxes, that's where the archival supplies we're buying comes from. So we're organizing. All of the town forest stuff goes together. All of the school stuff goes together. So that's all part of the inventory. But as we go through all of that work, what you're going to end up with is very valuable, but all it is a list of what we have. That's a huge improvement from where we are today. But the capital reserve aspect says, where do we want to be, you know, to make this a worthwhile project?
Right. My understanding was that the $3,500 was to get the project up and running, and then we would revisit this next year. That was my understanding.
Yes.
We discussed.
We're asking other committees and other warrants, you know, throughout this whole process this year, to be very specific in exactly what is gonna have to happen. And so, you know, I struggle with this because it's still very, you know, there's $3,500, which I think is a great seed money to start to do the assessment, to determine what's really gonna be needed, and to hopefully get something going with it. And then, you know, if you decide that you need more money, I think we could talk about it next year, but until somebody, whether it's a company or you or whoever, gets into it and we really understand what is needed, I couldn't support this.
Ooh,
The way it is.
one other opinion I have too about it is, you know, a lot of times we try to think about what happens in the future, like when the fire department gets a forestry truck or a boat or something like that, and think about the cost of it. I'm coming after you, Moynihan.
It's all right, I got big shoulders.
I look at it and say, I don't think the town really wants another scanner, computer, server, all these things that in perpetuity require money and maintenance and refreshing and IT director and stuff, and I don't see it as this one time, hey, let's manage this project, and then, we're not very old right now, so at some point the project has a finish, and I get nervous about that when we start funding new IT projects in different departments, especially if we can't use our existing infrastructure for it, so.
I think you have to look at the fact that in a sense, what you say is absolutely right. Nobody's looked at it for 25 years, so what difference does it make? But the people that come to me and say they want to find photos of this, they want to find documents, they want to find what happened with the Old Stone School or what's going on with the historic district zoning, all of those questions exist. You guys never see them. But one of the most recent things is spending 4 hours going through the boxes to try to dig out photos that somebody was looking for. Well, that's a total and complete waste of anybody's time. The flip side of this is let's not do it. Well, 25 more years, what difference does it make? To most people in town, I don't know what they think of the town's history. But I look at all of these warrant articles, and there's $650,000 of money to put into these warrant articles. I think requesting $10,000 for preserving our history is very reasonable.
Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying 25 years, nobody cares. I'm saying at some point, the historic nature will be cataloged, and there'll be an end to, nobody wants to know what I had for breakfast yesterday, type of thing, right? So like at some point, there would be some kind of a finish to the project of historical-based documents, right?
The best way, are you familiar with the Portsmouth Athenaeum?
Yes.
Yeah, so they have all of their photos and ephemera and books and whatever on their website.
Right.
Now, all of that work was done at one time to get it up on the website. And as certain things come in, they update the website, but the vast majority of the archives have already been processed. That's what this capital reserve fund is aiming for. What are Newington's archives, historical archives, in a way that everybody can access them?
Okay. The town history is, once it's gone, it's gone. And there are people who can recognize people in these photos and places, but if we want to capture that before my kids, next generation, are going to look at these pictures like, oh, that's some old person. I don't know who it is. There's some cool looking barn, but it's gone. I don't know what that means. But right now we have that expertise, so I'm with you. I think it's appropriate to try to preserve, document the history in a way that will go forward. We have a fantastic library in town with a brilliant librarian. They have a wonderful staff. They're really good at categorizing things, stick them in on the shelf, and later on finding it with a computer system and all that sort of stuff. And that's kind of what you're talking about doing, is creating a library of the stuff that we have. So I'm concerned that we haven't had a lot of discussion between the expertise that we have in town. They went to school for library science, and that's exactly what you're talking about, is documenting this wonderful history. I think we should utilize the people at the library, the resources that we already have, maximize that and get their opinion, even if they say, well, we're not gonna do all the scanning, but at least, here's a company that does it, or this is how we do it, or they are, here's 10 groups that did this, and this is how they did it. This is the way to do it. They might have that expertise.
Some some insights on that, because I have asked the library, not during COVID times, but before, to say we have all of these historic documents. Can we have a location in the library where we put all of this stuff?
Okay.
And the answer that came back is no, that all of their collections are already taking up all of the available space. And when the library edition was put on, the filing cabinets that used to have town history that existed in the attic of the library are now in the Historic Society. And I can open up the drawers and there's my mother's handwriting on all of the different folders.
Right. Well, it seems like a lost opportunity to not use that expertise to help this wonderful.
I can only do what I can, I mean, there's me, right?
Yeah.
I can ask them. In the past, there hasn't been any interest.
Yeah, maybe even the trustees of the library might have a different opinion.
It seems like it's a missed opportunity to not use their skill set to try to achieve what sounds like a wonderful goal for the town, is to preserve this history. That's what they do. I mean, that's their bread and butter, is doing that. If they don't want to do it, it confuses me. And maybe they don't want to put your stuff on their shelves, but at least they might advise procedures in which it could be done in an efficient way.
Procedures, advice and procedures are always welcome.
Yeah.
But when you're asking somebody to take time out of their day to actually do something, whether it's the town office or the library, people are already committed to whatever they've got on their job description.
I think respectfully, I think respectfully, and I don't think we know that. I think we need to, I think what you're hearing is that there are potential other alternatives that need to be explored before some of us would be comfortable moving forward. Because, people may be interested, I don't think we know until we ask.
Maybe some volunteers.
And the distinction is not using the library space. I think that's where you were told no. I think what we're saying is use the library to help develop a system where this could be automated, since they're used to filing, and then it could be stored on our website or wherever we decide to do electronically. I don't think anyone's saying that it's, storing pieces of paper is the solution. It's totally agree with you, it's not. It's not easy for people to find them, and, it's coming up with an automated solution that is efficient and cost effective.
Seems like that's their skill set, to not use that expertise that we give our salaries. It sounds like a missed opportunity.
Lou, I'd also say too, just on your comment about the $10,000 in the grand scheme, how big the warrant articles are and stuff like that. We've been a finer tooth comb on much less, and that theory of what's another 10 basically is the net. None of us really subscribe to, because things tend to snowball that way. I can't speak for the entire board, but you understand what I mean.
But I'd also like to say that to get a new project on the budget in the capital reserve, the hurdle to doing that is enormous. And I think you do have to put things in perspective. It's not a request for $100,000, it's a request for 10. And if you said for the last 25 years, you've saved $10,000 each year for 25 years by doing nothing, now's the time to actually start trying to do something. I guess the last point I just tried to make to everybody, you have the expertise to do this. It's a once in a generation thing. Barbara Hill cared, I care. Somebody might not pick this up for another 20 years. And so sometimes you have to jump when the iron's hot and take advantage of the expertise that you have, because losing that is also a lost opportunity.
make some remarks. First of all, every minute that we lose doing this, there are dozens of researchers out there who want to use this information to write books and articles and scholarly journal articles using this information, and they can't because it's not indexed. So what that means is that our town is not appearing in these journals, it isn't appearing in these books, isn't being represented in history because the researchers and historians have no way of getting access to that information. And that causes our town to lose history and lose prestige just because it isn't being written about, even though there are people that want to do so. So the sooner we get this stuff indexed, the sooner these historians can get access to this material, use it, and increase Newington's historical prestige and record, which is essential. And furthermore, it's imperative that we scan all this material immediately at an archival quality, meaning people that know what they're doing, the scanners, you know, with white gloves and all that stuff, so they're not damaging or degrading these photographs and documents. And it's essential that we do this as swiftly as possible, because if there is a fire, we will lose Newington's entire history. We need to get this stuff scanned in pronto, immediately, by experts who know what they're doing and can handle documents without damaging them. Right now, they've got, whenever they try to access something just on an ad hoc basis, they've got people pawing through a box of these fragile documents that are dozens, if not hundreds of years old. And every time they do that, they damage not only the document they're trying to get access to, but every single document they're pawing through to get to it. That's intolerable and it's unacceptable. You know, we need to have this put into an archive and then scanned so that if there's a fire, we'll still have the images of these documents saved somewhere and backed up. And to do all this will not be cheap. You know, it will take hundreds of hours to create write abstracts for each one of these documents, scan the document, enter that information into a database, including the imagery information, and it takes someone with some training to do that. It's a skilled job, and it'll take hundreds of hours of that person's time. That's hundreds of hours that Lulu doesn't have time to do that. So we need that person to sit down and do that job, and we need to begin that process immediately so that we can get this record preserved for ourselves and for our own history and the town's history. You know, that's the message here. You know, this is very important. We could lose all of Newington's history. Newington's one of the oldest towns, you know, on the New England seaboard. I mean, you know, if we lose that history, it'll be a tragic loss, not just for Newington, but for the entire country. You know, this town has a very important historical antecedents, especially for the Revolutionary War, for example. There were Pickerings that participated in the storming of the armory at the Revolution, which started the Revolutionary War that began America. People talk about the shot that at Lexington starting the Revolutionary War. Well, it was actually the storming of the armory in Portsmouth that was the first act of the Revolutionary War, which one of Lulu's ancestors participated in. And that's the kind of history that we're losing and is not being written about and is not being preserved because we have a bunch of documents sitting around in boxes in some person's attic just waiting for a fire to happen. You know, we need to do this now, and we shouldn't be funding, and 10,000 is just the beginning. We need to fund this so this gets protected and done. You know, and this is just for us, it's a responsibility that we have to the country.
Thank you for that, because you're absolutely right. All we have is originals right now, and they're one-of-a-kind originals.
Yeah, I just want to go a little bit of history. When I first got on the budget committee about 16 years ago when I retired, we had a regular program, and spending money at that time, it was putting records in books, and, you know, preservation books and cleaning paper and that sort of thing. Quite expensive per page, but we did it. And we had a sort of regular program. Now, we sort of leapfrog beyond that. Things are preserved electronically. So, you know, I think $10,000 is a reasonable investment. But starting ahead to preserve this, as John said, preserve this history. There's a lot of it there, and it's meaningful to people when they see it. And it's, as you say, it's our legacy. We're a town that's 350 years old, so we should, we should think about that. Yeah.
Do we have the updated total that the historic district commission spent in 2021? Was your final budget spent at $253? Because my point here is, we funded $4,800 in 2021. They're gonna turn back $4,500.
No.
We're talking about $5,500 here.
We spent every penny of
You
it.
did?
Yeah.
Okay.
We
But I have
are-
to agree that it's a starting point. To your point, Jen, it may cost significantly less to do it through other companies, but that doesn't mean that by approving this, we're saying we're gonna do $10,000 every year for the next 10 years. We're saying it's $10,000 to start. And then there's a lot of work that's gonna go into this, to figuring all these pieces out, whether it's the library people helping to figure this out, your expertise with it, whoever's kind of guides that $10,000 in the direction it goes. If it does cost $10,000 or more, then that's a different issue as we develop. But I think this is just a start of a fund. I understand, Brandon, your point as well. How many funds do we want to start? We don't always spend all of our budget lines as it is. We're not good at, necessarily getting into those granular pieces. But I think it's a start, and I think it's an important start. And when we have the discussion, I have some notes on it. Lulu brought up, should this be a warrant article? And that's why we're here with the warrant article. So I think that was discussed at length as to what the process would be to get a warrant article, how quickly you had to get it to them,
Yeah.
and what's the go forward. So.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, if I could just respond to you, Chris, really quickly. I guess my hang up is that the original amount was 7,000. And so now we're talking about 10,000, and I feel like there's not enough information to know how much, like at that time, we were all in agreement that $3,500 sounded like a great starting point, and now we're saying, okay, well, we're gonna add 10,000 more to that, and that's a good starting point. So what is a good starting point? I think knowing, having a plan or having a proposal, like, right, we just spent time talking to the principal about how much his windows were gonna cost, because he bid out, all right, this is how much it's gonna cost, So if we're going through other budgets, looking at, all right, this is gonna be how much this item's gonna cost us, this is how much we should budget for. And I understand this is different in that it probably will be more than that, but what is that? What does it look like? What do we have? What does it entail? What's the scope of work? And I think that's the part that I'm struggling with, especially since originally they asked was 7,000, and now we're back having another conversation about it. So for me personally, I think that we're like Jeff had said, I think we're speculating on what a good starting point is, and I'd just like to know more information about what the overall scope of the project would entail.
Could I just make a comment on that? The 7,000 that we originally asked for is like, what's the table of contents in a book? It's a list of what you're going to find in the book. But it's not going to tell you anything about what each of those chapters, all of the photos and the text and the documents. So the HDC budget was to just start and say, let's make that table of contents, because here's what we have. But now we're saying on the Capital Reserve Fund, the table of contents is very important, but now we've got to look and say, what are all of the chapters in our history? Where are all the photos? Where are all of the stories? So it was never meant to mislead anybody by saying, let's start at a low number and then come in with a bigger one. It was
It's two different projects, yeah, right.
Yeah,
one is for a year, that's in the regular budget, and capital reserve is always apply something that's down the road, it's
Down the
ongoing,
road.
getting ready to repay the road.
So your understanding of the item that was in the budget originally was just for 1 year, like, just like, that it was a 1-year project?
Labor to catalog. This is asking for.
But to catalog everything in 1 year was gonna be $7 grand?
No,
Right.
no, it was like, let's get started.
Remember, they asked for 7, they got 3,500.
Right.
So ideally, they'll spend the 3,500 catalog. If they don't, it'll roll, it'll roll over the next year, or they'll have it, they'll have a vendor lined up to do it.
The only other thing I have to say that's important to the conversation, I appreciate the passion, different perspectives on the whole thing. But this is similar to the fire department asking for, a defibrillator, and we don't run those departments, so when the head of a committee or head of the board or head of the department comes in and says, this is what I need to do, I don't usually make a decision on the warrant article based upon whether I think it's necessary or not. That's for the head of the commission, the committee, the board, the department to tell me, right? And we should all be listening to that. I can say, if this got awarded a $10,000 warrant article at town meeting, and it was endorsed by the budget committee, what are we spending the $10,000 on? And I don't know that we have a straight shot forward of, this is what it costs to do this, this is the company I'm using, this is the equipment that I have, this is the passageway I'm going.
But you won't know that until I'm able to say to somebody, I've got 90,000 documents in 400 boxes, and here's the list of what I have. Give me a bid for what your services are.
Correct.
And it might take me 2 years or 3 years to work our way through all of you take the big boxes where you have to sort everything in there, inventory everything in there, put them in categories, and then all of the categories get their own individual box.
Okay.
Um,
Can
I
I
think
ask
there's
a question
assumptions
as a
you can make
committee?
about that, though. I think you can make assumptions about how big the box is, you can take half of it, you can count, I mean, there's certain assumptions you can make to get a bid.
Can I ask a question as a committee, Jen?
Yeah.
So if Lulu was to come to us and say, hey, I've gone through a catalog, this you guys gave me $3,500 this year to go through it, we spent $3,500, we plan on doing that again next year. We're complete cataloging this and I need $40,000 because that's my bid to preserve the town of Newington history digitally. Would anybody be opposed to that?
I think it's more prudent to that point to put 10,000 this year and spread it out.
With
If
no-
you need to, or
Because
just
there's no
put the
plan.
start there.
There's no plan, it's at the discretion of the HDC.
Right, and I don't disagree with you, Brandon, but I think like you have to start somewhere, and if you put a certain amount of money, in a line, it doesn't mean that it gets spent right away, but we build funds to do things, right? So we're building a fund to preserve things, and that fund will, if it costs us $4,000 to Jen's point, then there's $6,000 for the future. To your point, if it costs us $40,000, well, maybe there's 10 already available to us, and we're only talking about 30 in the future, instead of talking about 40 in the future. So, I think, I think we've discussed this, we're beating this one pretty good, in my opinion. I think we need to vote, in my opinion.
I personally think that there's a lot of passion about preserving history, there's a lot of good reasons to do so, and I don't think anyone is opposing the project in general. I think the concern with the board that certainly I'm hearing is the lack of details of how to get from point A to point B. And I think that's the concern. And I'm gonna go back to my point in that we have experts in town and we should utilize them. We should take general photographs of, just the room that stuff is in, talk to them and say, hey, can you take these photographs, share them around your library network and give us some information back and let's make a plan. I think that's what we're looking for, maybe not that exact path, but that sort of level of detail. Maybe send some pictures to these companies that Jen might be referring to or some other stuff, but That's the trouble I have, is the
I think we heard that.
The issue with the plan.
That's your sense. Any new reflections here? Okay, are we ready to vote? Okay, so the motion is to recommend. So all in favor of recommend, as I understand, we have a motion.
The selectmen recommendations did not recommend, so when we opened the floor, was it in the affirmative?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it was I think it was to recommend.
Yes, I made that motion for recommend.
Okay, so all in favor of recommending, this forward to the public hearing? Our final vote was a recommendation forward. Raise your hand. Okay. Okay, all opposed? Okay. So a 4-4 split, I think we'll make a note of that. And I think you usually put the vote in when you've got a recommendation. So just say, budget committee splits 4-4 and recommended.
It's a good.
I think that's perfect results.
There you go, yeah. Okay, thank you for your, everyone's time on that one, I appreciate it. Thank you, Lulu, for waiting this long. So that one is a 4-4. 10,000. So the next article is I. Capital reserve fund, I'm sorry, we just talked about that.
Yeah, let's get off that.
Get off that one, okay. That's the 50/50. Okay, the next one is $10,000 to hire a seasonal recreation director, not recommended by the selectmen.
I'd like to make a motion to table this until, someone from the rec department, is here to discuss that.
Okay, probably be a public hearing, but who knows, if we've got time, next week we will, but otherwise.
If I made my understanding, the rec committee does not intend to come until the public hearing, so we won't hear this until the public hearing.
Well, then I would say then we can hear it then. We can't, there's nothing to talk about. $10,000, who is it, what's it for?
Yeah, right. Any comment from the selectmen on this one?
Why did the selectmen not recommend it?
Because we're not gonna have the summer camp this year, and we've already gone back to where we were before with the Y. The Y is agreed. Last year, because of COVID and all the restrictions, they didn't wanna do it. We started up our own camp. It was very mind-boggling, very, if it wasn't for Martha running up and down, back and forth to keep the thing going, it was a disaster with a lot of inherent problems that we won't get into, but we feel much safer when the professionals like the Y would take it over and run it.
Okay. So, do we have a motion to table? But as I say, this may go to the public hearing. Is there a second on the motion to table? Okay, all in favor of tabling? Right. Okay. So table it. Okay. Seasonal recreation. The next one is K, that's $5,000, Police Department Electronics Radio Capital Reserve Fund. We have a motion on it?
Make the motion.
Motion to recommend?
Yes.
Second.
A second? Okay, how much is in that?
15,000.
15,000. Chief, you have anything particular to say on that?
No, I've talked about it before. This is I believe this is the J1 system regarding paperless electronics in the cruisers. And a matter of fact, just today we were talking to the state regarding some grant monies where either they pay 100% on certain things, with laptops and the computers, 25% and 50%. So we're looking at that aspect, which would be able to help out with this reserve account with the monies that we already have in there. So.
Okay, can I give a bottom line with you, the whole package?
No, not right now, because I don't have the numbers. It talks about printers and scanners, the licenses and everything like that. So once we start looking at numbers, and then we send it to the state and they affirm. I forget the numbers that they're allotting us for certain things. So.
Do you have a cap on the reserve?
For this, we do.
Yeah. Did you remember what it is?
Oh, the cap of it, I think we're
Yeah, what are you building it to?
25.
25, okay.
Any further discussion on this one? All in favor of recommending? Okay, opposed? Abstention? One abstention. Okay. L, $5,000 replacement of major fire department equipment fund. Other than fire department fund. It's, how much is in this fund?
5,000. It
5,000
was started
now.
new last year.
You didn't put anything in last year.
No, we started it last year.
You started last year, this is,
This was the fund, John, I think we took it out of vehicles.
Correct, when we separated the vehicles.
separated, okay, so this is anything not directly connected to the vehicle.
Correct, this is strictly equipment.
Okay, you got a target figure, or what you're doing?
25,000.
25K, okay. All right,
I make a motion to approve, to recommend Article L.
got a second? You got 2 seconds there, okay. Any further discussion?
I had a question, why wouldn't this just be part of the regular budget? Why does this need a warrant article?
So this is for any equipment that costs above and beyond a one-time charge of $5,000. So we have numerous pieces of equipment that cost anywhere between $12,000 to $25,000 per piece of equipment.
Sure.
And our equipment line is only $8,500.
Okay, so is the fund different than an operating budget?
Correct.
Right, so is but the fund is funded through, is funded through the budget appropriation anyway, right? So you're basically saying that the approved budget is 5,000 shy? Is that kind of like why this is here?
No, so our budget line for equipment purchases and parts and replacement stuff like that is $8,500.
Right, but that's operating, I'm talking about.
Correct.
I'm
So if I
talking
have a
about,
piece-
is there a line item for the fund?
In the
No,
budget?
that has to be voted
No.
on individually.
Oh, so there is no line?
No, there is no line item for that.
Oh, I see.
Otherwise, this has to be expended this year and then otherwise encumbered or given back to the town. This establishes a separate fund that is like a savings account.
Oh, okay. Does this fund already exist?
Yes, we started last year.
Okay, so basically every year we're gonna keep having these warrant articles to add more to this fund? Is that?
No,
Until we hit a cap.
until we hit the cap.
I see.
And John, one thing is to do is, they used to have this combined with the replacement vehicles. So what happened is they keep robbing this fund. They keep robbing the vehicle purchase fund to fix the vehicles. So they separated it, so they be able to have their own fund and repair, if they need a major repair.
Okay, it makes sense, it just seems like a very ad hoc way to fund the
So
capital reserve.
it's the one-off item, so if our budget for equipment purchases is $8,500 and our Jaws of Life blows up tomorrow, I can't fund that without overspending the budget. But the life expectancy of those is 15 to 20 years. So why would I budget every year $15,000 or $18,000 for equipment when I don't need $15,000 or $18,000 worth of equipment a year? When I can build a capital reserve fund over a couple of years, and then I have that money there for when we have a major piece of equipment that I can't buy out of the general line item without overspending a line item, come up, and then the money sits there until we have such time that we need it.
So in terms of capital reserve funds, they can't be budgeted, they have to be approved through a special warrant process?
Correct.
Oh, I see. Okay, so this is sort of in that.
Yeah, so once the town votes it, it's there for them to spend. It's not sitting in their budget to be spent for something else.
Right, yeah,
It earmarks it, for savings for specific.
right. Why don't we just do it all in one shot?
Because you raise the tax rate that one year.
Yeah, right. If we could project, we could do it. We don't. We don't know which one's gonna hit, so we bring them all up and down at the same time. Comes out the same. We just have to vote on one individual.
Right, it just makes the process more tedious.
Yes.
Yes.
Any other further discussion on that? This one?
Just a quick procedural
Mhm.
observation. It seems like every time we're asking the same, 2 to 3 questions. How much is in it and how much is the target that we're trying to shoot for?
Yeah.
you know, right now, we say, okay, this Article L is targeted to 25K. Why does that 25K not written down on this document somewhere?
That's probably what we're gonna do in the future. We're gonna have, how much is in it now and what the cap is. I think that's a good idea.
Typically, they do.
Yeah.
Meeting time, it says they fund.
Yeah, it does.
But that, you know, that number and the target should be
If we had it now,
consistent
we
from year, because I wouldn't want it next year to be
Good point.
20,000
Yeah.
and the year after be 23, you know, off of memory. It should be written down.
Yeah, Martha.
Yeah, just for the committee's edification, this year, unfortunately, the funds, the balances that we usually use to put on the warrant articles are not displayed correctly or where you want them to be. So we've got to back into these numbers, and that's why you don't see them on the warrant yet, but we will have them by next week.
But yeah, balance and cap are both good. I'm not sure we had the cap before, we really did. They're both very useful.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. Any further discussion on this one? This is Article L. If not, all in favor? Aye. Opposed, abstentions, none. Okay, great. On to M. And here we're looking for $2,500 for the body worn cameras, including mounted audio equipment. Okay, again, what did we talk about here, Mike?
So ironically, 5 years ago, when I came into the budget committee, Brandon asked me this specific question regarding body worn
A
cameras.
real Nostradamus, you know.
And what my thought process is, and knowing Newington, we don't have a lot of complaints against our officers. However, you're looking at the governor's order regarding Law Enforcement Accountability Act, is that they're looking at body worn cameras, and there's gonna be federal and state grants out there, and right now in the Senate, they're talking about how they're gonna pay for this. How's the state gonna pay for it from municipalities? I did put in for a grant last year for it and got denied, but there's other grants that we're gonna be looking forward. So I want to start establishing a fund regarding this to see. I know it's gonna cost us about $95,000 to $120,000 to outfit all the officers with body cameras and the cameras in the cruisers. It's expensive. It's something for accountability that we're gonna have to do. So the grants, again, looking at, we don't know if it's gonna be 100% funded by the state, 25 or 50%. I just wanna establish a fund and see where we go within the next couple of years. And we're gonna be working on looking grants, heavily looking at it. So we talked about this at the police commission and they agreed, let's put some money into it and see where we can go.
Okay, yeah, you know, I agree. Ultimately, I'm happy that we don't have cameras, but I know it's gonna be very expensive and expensive. But if it's mandated, then we have no choice.
Yeah.
Yes.
I just have a question about the grants. Do they look at, I'll make a motion to
Okay, great,
recommend
thank
this.
you.
I'll second.
We got a second.
Perfect. My question was, so with the grants, do they look at like how much the town has funded it? Like, is there any piece of that where they're looking to say, hey, this town is, you know,
Yeah, I don't know how the state's gonna look at it that way, if you're talking about how much the towns pay for taxes and.
no, I'm saying like, okay, well, this town's being proactive about it, they have an account, they're putting money in it. Like, is that an advantage to getting a grant?
No, I don't think it is, as long as we're able to say, like, this year I can't go for it. If it's a 50-50 grant, this year I can't go for it, okay? So, you know, I hope it's a funded mandate, but I mean, that's just hoping for something like that. I know it's not gonna be funded, I know we're gonna have to be paying some part of it. So, I figure a little at a time, little bites at a time, so.
Any further questions?
Yes. I expect you're correct, it'll probably be mandated, et cetera, et cetera. Hypothetically, if for some reason that mandate goes away and this money is put in this fund, what happens if we decide not to go with body cameras? Does that money just get returned to the town? I mean, chances are this is not gonna happen, but I'm just curious about the process.
The town meeting would have to vote to return those funds
Yeah.
to the town general fund.
There'll be another warrant.
Fine,
Okay, let's go back to the number and body cams.
right. Chances are that won't happen, but I just wanted to
Good
understand.
question.
how it works.
Irrationally so against this, like completely irrationally, and hard time.
I know, and it's, I don't think anybody thinks we need body cams here. But if state or the federal government says we do, then eventually we're gonna have to.
This isn't limited to body cams, it's also
Dash cams.
Dash cams.
Gas cams too, yeah. Are they cheaper than body cameras, dash cams?
They are, but if we're gonna do it right, do it right. And the combination between the two is if, right now, we have some cameras in the cruisers.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things, if you put on the lights, the cameras automatically go. But actually, they go 10 seconds before the lights are switched on. I don't know how that works. But with the systems, that we're looking with the system that we're looking at, they're compatible. So as soon as the lights go on, the cruiser camera goes on as well as the body camera, so you're not missing anything. So.
Okay, all right. And the officer can't shut it off?
Correct.
Okay.
You can do this.
Yeah, question?
One last question, is there insurance wise, like with our, town liability type of, do they ask about this?
Not currently, Kalia certification, we got a discount for.
Yeah,
Right.
so I think a lot of it happens is, obviously, right now without cameras, it's he said, she said type of deal, right? So for court purposes, with the body camera capturing the images that you have, and if there's a false complaint against an officer, obviously that's gonna benefit us, and Primex would go forward in helping us out.
How far out in time are you expecting to, need, is this a 2-year out, 5-year out question? And then the second question is, if we don't go cameras, is audio enough in the short term? Would that help?
I guess that's a tough question. If looking, audio is always good, and right now the laws that they're trying to deal with, the Senate's trying to deal with, obviously, is that you have to have two-person permission before your audio.
Yeah.
Okay, in New Hampshire, unless you get a warrant for it, a one party. So audio, we still have to identify, but you're still missing the image. Specifically, I don't think there's any equipment that's just audio. It's obviously, it's usually audio and video.
Audio doesn't do it.
Correct.
Okay, any further questions? You ready to vote on this? All in favor of recommending forward? None, okay, any opposed or abstentions? Will you oppose it?
Yes.
Okay.
Opposed.
One opposed.
More, completely irrationally.
It's frustrating, I agree with you. Caught in the vine. Okay, that was M, cameras, that's a yes, and the last one is petition from Jessica Morgan, 24 registered, $25,000 to purchase the original equipment for playground behind the town hall and Board of Selectmen agents expense. It was not recommended by the select. Any questions or discussion on this one?
Actually, I don't know, it doesn't say if it is or isn't recommended by the select, but what is their opinion?
The selectmen did not recommend this, they voted it.
Oh, okay.
For procedural reasons, that we recommended that everything go through the recreation committee. This was way back in September when this was talked.
Okay.
Didn't get through the recreation, they presented, there was no recommendation out of it. And the recreation has other monies in there for other equipment. And one of the things they wanted was a zip line, and we were a little cautious on the zip line with young people and thinking of line.
This was an article in?
So we denied it.
Okay, all right. Okay.
I'd like to make a motion to table this. I feel like I feel like without her here to speak to what she's looking for and what she's a PowerPoint type of person. And, I just feel like it's not, but we don't have all the information.
Okay.
I think it would be best to wait.
I said, I think that rather than taking a lot of time to have to bring these people in. Next week, we got a full agenda that's gonna have to wait for public hearing. And I think in these cases with the table and the rep, we just make a note, this is, table recommendation pending public hearing input.
I don't really agree with him as well.
But anyway,
This is whether or not the budget committee recommends it. This is still a warrant article that is going to show up at public vote and for public meeting. I mean, it's whether we recommend I see it as, do I recommend the fact that there's a, warrant article submitted by petition rather than going through the recreation department who denied it?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'd feel more comfortable if we had somebody here from rec and Jess to,
okay, that was your motion?
yes.
Did we,
I was seconding that.
You would second that
So we could
motion?
actually have a discussion on it. And, a point on that, people know we're discussing warrant articles tonight, it's in our agenda, and I think it's problematic if people aren't showing up. I understand people have families, everything like that, but, it's problematic. Lulu made her time to come and talk to us about her warrant article, the chiefs, the board of fire engineers are here, the sewer commission was here. When people don't show up to discuss their warrant article, it makes it very difficult, and to your point, John, it's gonna make it harder for us going forward, because now we've tabled 2 or 3 of these, so.
well, we haven't tabled this one yet.
Well, right, we're voting to table this one, I'm assuming shortly, but if we do, this will be the third day of discussion, or waiting on people to actually come to the budget and talk to us.
So we've got a motion to table, I think from you.
Yes, I seconded that.
You seconded it?
Yeah, but.
Okay.
The
You
two
wanna-
things that we tabled so far are rec department items. This is also, in my opinion, belongs in Article G as a rec department item. This is just, it's all the same stuff
Okay, if we're gonna table it,
by
let's
the
table
same
it.
people.
Otherwise we'll discuss it. So, all in favor of,
A question.
Yeah.
If it gets tabled, when does it take up again?
well, that's it, it won't probably be taken up until our meeting during the public, essentially, immediately after the public hearing, we vote on all of these things.
When you say a public hearing, you're talking about the town meeting, or is that different?
No, the public hearing on our budget, and then our recommendation, then, we do have to recommend at that point. It goes forward.
Oh, that big meeting at the end?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Does anyone know what conversations the rec department had regarding this and why they didn't do it themselves?
Okay, I'm gonna, we're at the table and we're not tabling. You don't wanna table it, vote no on the table. Okay, so I'm gonna call a vote. How many want to table this motion? 3. Okay, how many don't want to table?
Yeah, 4.
4.
Right, we need to
4 to table? Could I have that vote again?
I thought I had six to table, but.
Really?
Show of hands, yeah.
Take it on.
To table.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
5, okay, it carries. So it's tabled? Good. All right, that's the last one. Any other critical, yes, Mike?
Well, I got a question, I don't know if this is the venue that asked it, but I did put in another warrant article, maybe Martha or Ted could talk about regarding the revolving account. Is that something we're going to go forward with the budget committee with that?
Right, it's not a budget committee article.
Okay.
It doesn't involve public expenditures, that we don't
Okay.
discuss.
Okay.
We handle that way.
Just checking. Public procedure.
Okay, any other thing? Okay, so our next meeting is next week, and it's highway and television. Thank you all. Meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
I started out interning.
But you know, you can see how bad. Because otherwise you forget. Professional. And we get to where, yeah, and what they do, they come to the house, and they come in, but I will. Oh, thank God he stays over.
Hi, Ian. See you, Brent. Bye, Bob. Bye, Jay. See you, Pat. I'm coming for you, Moynihan.
I'm good. I can take it. I'm good.
I believe it.
I expected more. And that's why I wanted to make sure that you guys have all the answers in the packet, but all the stuff on the contract. I want to make sure at least, I ask the same question, if I'm not ready, just not doing my homework.
Oh, they're old now.